For any family.
To go back to Airbnb because he left his stuff and I didn't know that he left it. So the guy is messaging me like, there's passport here, there's stuff here. I'm like, okay, we're sending someone.
Yeah, because it's a percentage or
I
anything.
hope that we're going to accident. 36.
And of course, the tensions in Eastern Europe, the tensions in the South China Sea, all of those things are going to crash. So I fully expect to see
We're not talking about relations. We're talking about like in a trade war.
All right, everyone, we're going to continue the conference now. Feel free to bring food to your seats or whatever if you want. Next up, we're going to have the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of the Revolution Report, Slava, and she's going to talk a bit about the Ukraine situation. So, you ready, Slava?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Every time someone says Slava, I think they're gonna say Slava Ukraine.
Slava Slavia.
And at first I thought how unlucky I am to share the name with the Nazi slogan. But then I thought of it, maybe it's for the better, because now anytime someone asks me for my name, they look at me, interestingly, and they're like, are you Ukrainian? I'm like, yes, I am. And right away, people are like, oh, we're so sorry. Putin is crazy. Russia bad, 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 bad Russia. And something along that line. And it gives me an opportunity to talk to them and, explain a little bit what's exactly happening in Ukraine. Because unfortunately, here in the West, people don't know what's going on in Ukraine. They don't know the history of Ukraine. They don't know how this conflict started. They think that it started last year because that's what Western media has been saying all this time, They don't know that this conflict has been in the making for many, many years. So today I would like to kind of dive into the history of Ukraine a little bit with you. I hope you don't mind. Not just like recent history, 10, 20 years, not even last century, with the infamous Nazis. But I want to jump like a millennia ago, when the Kievan Rus was formed, and it was basically a birthplace of both the nations, like Ukrainian nation and the Russian, and many others that are around. But these two are the ones in question today, right? So we'll focus on them. So yes, in 9th century, Kiev Rus was formed, and Ukrainian nationalists, they like to claim heritage to the Kievan Rus. And it's no surprise because Kiev had been the capital of Kievan Rus, and it still is the capital of Ukraine right now. So they're like, that's our country. Kievan Rus was Ukrainian. But they're conveniently ignoring the second part of the name, Rus, which is the prerequisite of the modern name of Russia, which in Russian it sounds like Россия, Rus, Россия. But Ukrainian nationalists don't care about that, obviously. So I wanted to use this slideshow. I hope I can make it work. That's basically the map of Kievan Rus, the way it was in the beginning. As you can see, it was not the whole modern Ukraine. It was basically the western Ukraine, a little bit of the south, and then the whole modern territory of Belarus, and a little bit of Russia over there, the Moscow region. And let's see if I can change it. Yep, it's changing. Okay, and on some maps, what was interesting for me, I was looking for these ancient maps, and it used to, they call it Russia. So I'm sure Ukrainian nationalists don't like that. They're like, what? Why it's called Russia? And what's interesting here is that that's the only when this western part of Ukraine called Galicia was part of Kievan Rus. So that's the only time that we were together, basically. And that's where I'm from. I'm from Galicia, so not only my name, I have to share it with Nazi slogan, but I was also born in that part of Ukraine, Galicia, where all these Nazi collaborators had their headquarters. And you know that meme that's been shared around social media? Never ask woman what her age is, never ask the guy how much he makes, and never ask Ukrainian what his grandpa was doing in 1939. Well, I'm happy to report that my grandpa was only born in 1933, so he was a little child. But his father, my great-grandpa, he conveniently had 16 kids. So I guess that was his way of avoiding like volunteering, because I'm not sure if they were drafted. I don't think so, because most of these Nazi collaborators, like when you look into their history, they all volunteered. So that means they wanted to go and join those Nazis. Yeah. They were not drafted, not like my cousins right now in Ukraine. They, against their will, they were drafted by Ukrainian government, and I have 3 cousins now fighting. They're basically being sent to meat grinder. I don't know how long they'll survive there. I know already so many people who have either got injured or died. One family relative died, one classmate died. People are dying left and right. There's like huge parks turned into cemeteries now, especially in Western Ukraine. And I'm not sure why. Like, I was very suspicious why in the Western Ukraine there's so many people being drafted. So let's get back to history and see how things were evolving, how things were changing. After the Kievan Rus started collapsing, like it became weak, and different empires were. Can you open the door? Yeah, someone is trying to get in. Yeah, different empires were trying to invade, and there were like bloodbath, like wars all around. So sometime in 13th century, this part of where I'm from, and a little bit north, a kingdom was formed called Halych-Volhynia. Basically, it's Galicia, because for you in Ukrainian, Galicia is called Halych or Halichina. So it's a little different from English. Yeah, and it basically became separate from the rest of the territories that once were together during Kievan Rus. You can see on the map, Golden Horde, the Mongols were coming from the east, and majority of like Russian territories fell under their influence. And then the western part of Ukraine became part of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So you can see almost all of the Ukraine, not just west, but even some of the central Ukraine, also all of the Belarus, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, that was all one big, huge empire from 14th to 16th century, including that part, Galicia, which, let me show you, it's right here. That's the Galicia region. You might have seen this map. It's been circulating all around social media. I don't know if I agree exactly with it, but some Ukrainian nationalists, they claim not only that Kievan Rus was like original Ukraine, they say that the real Ukraine was actually formed in 1654. So that yellow part in the middle, that was Cossack Hetmanate. So you might have heard the city called Zaporozhye. Recently there have been lots of talks about Zaporozhye NPP, the nuclear power plant, because it's under Russian control. Ukrainians are hitting on it, so there was a lot of talks about like possible explosion and stuff like that. Well, that city, Zaporozhye, it's a really old city, dating back to 17th century. In that city, Cossacks had formed like a fortress and a huge army. Even though they were under the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, so they were under the control of Polish people, but they wanted independence. So they were fighting to become like a separate country. And in 17th century, they didn't have enough power to fight the Poles. So their leader, Hetman Bogdan Khmelnytsky is his name, he asked for help from Russian Tsar, because by that time Russia was already like gaining power, and there was Russian Tsar, they had a huge army. So in 1654, that's when Bogdan Khmelnytsky, the leader of Cossacks, he made a deal, basically like a treaty. He asked for protection from Russian Tsar. And Russians were happy to help. But Ukrainians, they got their protection. They became like adjacent to the Russian Empire, but they weren't happy for long. So in like 17 something, in the beginning of 18th century, the next hetman, the next leader after that one was gone, the next one, he was called Ivan Mazepa. He was like, no, we want to fight Russians now. We're done with Poles. So they started fighting with Russians, but that's when Catherine the Great was the ruler, and she's like, no guys, you're part of Russia. And she was also like, you gotta, honor the treaty. We signed the treaty. You were supposed to be with us. So what are you doing now? In the meantime, the western part, where the Galicia region and the rest of them, the Lvov region, they were still part of Poland. But then, in 18th century, Poland started collapsing. So there was this period of partitioning of Poland, and when it completely fell apart, the Western Ukraine was kind of divided between the newly formed Austrian-Hungary Empire, and some territories went under the Russian Empire. And the Austrian Empire was very short-lived. Like, I think they formed in the late 1800s and up until the end of World War I. So 1918, that was the end of Austrian Empire, and that's when that region of Galicia went back under Polish control. So you can see how between Austrians and Polish, that region was always, under their control and not Russian. And that's the place where the hatredism towards Russia grew up the biggest. Like, that's where it comes from. So one may ask, why is that happening? Like, why they hate Russians so much? If they were, the last time they were with Russians was like in Kiev and Rus. So what's going on? The only time, like for a few months, I know during World War I, you know how during war territories like change for a few months under this control, then for a few months. So in 1914, for like a few months, Russian Empire had control of Galicia, and that was basically it. Then it went under control of Poland, and then when newly formed Soviet Union took power, I know in 1920 for 3 or 4 weeks, so like about a month, they created Soviet Galicia. Which I'm sure some of you probably never heard, that there was such a thing as Soviet Galicia.
Bring it back.
I wish. Yeah, it was also before the World War I finished, there was like a little attempt of Ukrainian nationalists to create an independent Ukraine. So the same way as Cossacks were trying to create it in the 17th century, the Ukrainian nationalists, Petlura and so on, they were trying to create a Western independent Ukraine. It was called Zunar, and it was also very short-lived. The Polish said, no, we don't like it. You cannot be independent. And that's because they were denied this opportunity. These little organizations started forming of Ukrainian nationalists. So things like OUN, Ukrainian Nationalist Organization, with the leader Stepan Bandera. Also Ukrainian Cossack groups. So there were even Cossacks in the Western Ukraine, not just the central or eastern. And also Ukrainian Insurgent Army. the partisan army, UPA. They were all popping up like mushrooms after the rain. And I'm not sure why Poland allowed them to. They were probably mainly underground, you know, they were doing their dirty tricks underground. But yes, these guys, they. Oh, I missed this one. Let's move on. Yeah, that's the Russian Empire. Let's go further. Yeah, that's the Kingdom of Galicia. Oh, yeah. Do you know this guy? Have you seen a picture of him?
Oh yeah.
That's their infamous leader. the one who they worship day and night. He looks quite funny, to be honest.
Yes.
They call the master race.
Yes. Yeah, they love him so much that not only they have flags.
He looks like an alien.
Yeah, this was the black and red were the colors of OUN flag, and the modern Ukrainian Nazis are using exactly the same. Like they didn't even try to deviate or like hide it somehow. They're just no, we're gonna stick to what's working. Why should you change something? Yeah, every single parade, every march, they have torches, they have flags, and this sign says, "Follow your hero." So Bandera is truly a hero for these people. They want him back. Also, in Ukraine, they started putting monuments for Bandera everywhere. So now there is no city that there wouldn't be a monument dedicated to Stepan Bandera, unfortunately. It's crazy. And you know what happened with them, right? They lost together with the German Nazis, but not all of them. Some of them went underground, just like they appeared from the underground, the same way they went under again.
Mm-hmm.
And the West was interested in keeping them there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They want to have these, because the Soviet Union was formed, so they're like, no, we can't allow the Soviet Union have all the power and, you know, get rid of all the Nazis. We need to keep some of them alive. So what do you think happened to some of these Nazis, Nazi collaborators, like, you know, followers of Bandera? Yeah?
Yeah, they were sent to Canada.
Exactly. They found home, not just in Canada, but here in the United States, especially the city we're in right now. Chicago has a huge Ukrainian diaspora. There's like thousands and thousands of them. They have Ukrainian village. I will not be surprised if Chicago Avenue, which is like the main street of Ukrainian village, will be renamed after Bandera soon. Like,
Oh my
I will not
God.
be surprised. It
Oh
could
my
be.
God. Oh man.
Because in Ukraine, you know, in Kiev, they have this place called Baba Yar,
Yep.
where tons of Jewish and communists were buried. They were some executed, some buried alive. Well, that place, the street that leads towards Baba Yar is called Bandera Street.
Oh my
Oh
god.
Can
my
you, can you
God.
imagine the audacity of these people to name the
Jeez.
street? So now people who want to visit the cemetery, you know, the relatives are buried there. They have to drive on the street of Bandera. It's just crazy. So yeah, in the United States, there was this group called Canadian, like it was sponsored by the United States, but it was in Canada. It was called Canadian Christian Council for Refugees. And you know what they did? They lobbied the Canadian government to admit these former Nazis from Ukraine into Canada and United States, and they placed them to work in mines and other unionized places. Can you guess for what purpose? To break up the unions and to create chaos. So all the rights that workers have been fighting for years, because you know, in 1920s, 30s, in the United States, Canada, workers had gained lots of rights. Well, with the help of Ukrainian Nazis, some of those rights were taken away. And there's even like memorials and monuments in Canada and the United States dedicated to these fascists. So like in Canada, there is Oakville Memorial specifically to this Galicia SS division. And what's most surprising is the name of that memorial. It's called Victims of Communism. So the Ukrainian Nazis were victims of communism. And you know, CIA has been Nazifying Ukraine for decades. Like some people think it's just now, in the past 20 years.
No.
But no, from 50s. Like
Yeah.
there is evidence from their own declassified documents. The CIA has one of them. It's called Project Aerodynamic, which tells in great detail that starting with 50s, they were placing field agents in Western Ukraine to work with these underground OUN members who were like remaining there. They also dropped equipment into Ukraine because they wanted them to have something to fight with. All the supplies, anything you need, they would just give it to them. So things like that were continuing all the way till the time when Soviet Union collapsed. And then once it collapsed, it continued and actually intensified. So in 90s, the United States had started sponsoring kids camps. So it's like, I'm not sure if there is an equivalent in United States, but it's like Boy Scout camp, something like that.
Yeah,
I remember going to school and the teachers would tell us, like, anyone who wants to join camp, please, it's all inclusive. You don't have to pay for anything. Just come join. And I never joined, but some of my classmates did. And they were telling me later, like, it used to be like a summer camp, so when they would come back to school in September, they would tell, like, they were trained hard. They were put in forest and, like, survive on your own at night in cold. Like, they were trained really hard. They wanted those kids to be like, happening?
They're calling from the camp.
CIA wants to know your location.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't know what's doing that. Like, I really.
Oh my god.
It's muted, and it's so I don't know what.
Oh my god.
I don't know what it's. Yeah.
Bandera. It's the ghost of Bandera.
Yeah, no, I know. I just need to figure out why it's
Okay.
doing that. But go ahead. Sorry, never mind me.
Yeah, I don't need this speed.
Oh, it's back.
They don't like me talking about Nazis, I guess. Yeah, the CIA is like, nope, those guys are good. Anyway, so yes, as I was talking about these school camps and stuff like that, another interesting moment that I remember from school I started in late 90s, and I remember history books were issued every single year. We would have new history book. Like we could study math and science from old, often ripped books. Like I guess science doesn't change, but history, I mean, it was revised every year. So back then I didn't understand what was happening, but now I know. They needed to change, you know. They wanted these kids to be really brainwashed and taught what they intended them to know. And then in the beginning of 2000s, we could see how, like, in all parts of Ukraine, especially in the western part where I'm from, nationalist movements started to grow a lot. And they started bringing back the memory of Bandera, Shukhevich, Petlura, and the rest of them. And I think 2004, that's when we can really see how Ukraine became polarized. East versus West. In 2004, that's when Orange Revolution happened, and the Western countries had spent so much money on it. It was one of many CIA orchestrated color revolutions. It was called Orange because of one of the guys who was running for president. So let me give you like a little backstory. What happened? There were two main parties running. One was Viktor Yushchenko and one Viktor Yanukovych. So Yushchenko is the pro-West guy, you know, the EU, and then Yanukovych was more friendly towards Russia because he was from the eastern Ukraine. And he was also speaking Russian language. The Yushchenko was speaking purely Ukrainian, so that was like a clear sign for these nationalists too. And what's funny, they had a normal elections, but in Ukraine, when two candidates gain less, like each of them when gains less than 50%, then the second round of elections, and they both get like, I don't know, 39% or something. So the second round of elections was scheduled, and to the surprise of United States, Yanukovych won by 3%, and they were furious. They didn't like that at all. So they started this campaign that it was rigged elections. Lots of people were like brought to the streets, you know, huge demonstrations were happening, and demonstrations were not only happening in the western Ukraine or Kiev. So in those parts, the supporters of Yushchenko were protesting, but in the east, Yanukovych support, they were also protesting, but they were protesting in support. They were saying, no, it's because he won because we voted for him. Like we went in big numbers, and you could see if you like, I couldn't find the map in English that would show the percentage of how many people voted, but I remember it was like 87, 90% something people in the East Ukraine and in the South, they predominantly voted for Yanukovych because they felt like he's going to represent their interests. He was the one speaking Russian. He didn't promise to clamp down on Russian speakers. He was not planning on taking their rights away. Whether Yushchenko, on the other hand, guess what? His wife was born here in Chicago in the family of Ukrainian nationalists. She worked for, I think, U.S. State Department, U.S. Treasury, and in White House. She worked in Reagan's administration. And she was really, really like pro-Ukraine, bring back the nationalism. So I have a feeling that, you know, Yushchenko was brought up just because he was married the right person. And he was like not really a politician. He was like this guy who he couldn't even talk like a politicians talk, you know. He was really weak opponent. And then they created this whole story with him being poisoned by some, I don't remember, dioxin or something like that. And of course they blamed that poisoning on Yanukovych. They said, look, he wants to win so bad that he's poisoning his opposition. Yeah, so, you know, when all these demonstrations were happening and fueled by United States, the Supreme Court of Ukraine, of course, under pressure, they announced, yes, it was rigged, we need another election. So the third round of elections were announced, and surprise, surprise, Yushchenko won. Like, how, I don't know, like somehow people fell for it. But, so he became the president. In 2005, he became officially president. In Ukraine, they have 5-year terms for president. So Yushchenko was president from 2005 to 2010. He didn't fulfill any of his promises. Like he was promising NATO for Ukraine, that Ukraine will be part of EU, that the salaries in Ukraine will be just like in Europe. The quality of life will go up, but none of that have happened. So people became so disappointed that in 2010, when Yushchenko was running again for president, he got, I think, less than 5% of votes. That was the worst result in history of Ukraine. He became 5th, I think. So his second, Julia Tymoshenko, if you remember, lady with the braid on her head, she got to the second round, and Yanukovych. You would think that because they went so harsh on him during Orange Revolution, they ousted him basically, right? They didn't recognize that he was the legitimate winner, so you would think he will go away and he will not gonna try again. But no, in 2010 he did try again. And because of this experience with Yushchenko for 5 years, people were so disappointed. And Julia Tymoshenko was together with Yushchenko, so they're like, oh, she's the same. So that's why in 2010 Yanukovych won, which was a shock for the whole Western world. They're like, not again! This Russian guy wins elections again. What's happening? But they couldn't do anything about it. Like, they tried. I remember in 2010 they were trying to mobilize people, but people were probably not ready yet. Like, not so many years have passed since Orange Revolution, and people were like, nah, we did go and nothing happened, like nothing have changed. Why should we, waste our time, basically? So people just decided to accept Yanukovych as their president. And then, fast forward 2014, actually 2013, a year before the coup, in the end of 2013, Yanukovych had to make this, I would say, the most important decision in his career because Ukraine was in a tough economic situation, so they needed a loan. And Yanukovych had a choice between a loan from IMF, they needed, I think, $40 billion, or he could take a loan from Russia. The difference between these loans was that IMF, when they give loans, it's not for free. It's not, it comes with conditions. So the conditions were terrible. He would have to cut down on pensions, on all of the discounts that people had for subsidies for utilities and stuff like that. All kinds of stuff, like state ownership, like state enterprises would have to be privatized, which Ukrainian oligarchs wanted that. They were like, yes, can we line up already? So I understand why Yanukovych, he had a hard choice. On the other hand, Russia was offering the same kind of loan, plus discount on gas. Yeah. And what's most important, and people don't know that IMF was like, if you deal with us, you can't make another deal with Russia. Russia, on the other hand, was like, we'll give you the loan, you can still deal with them if you want. So they didn't put this condition that only us. So that's why I'm not surprised why Yanukovych turned the Russian side. Like, he decided to work with Russians. Because for any president, it's bad when the quality of life goes down, so he probably figured, I don't want to be walled, I better, get a loan from Russia. But these, Ukrainian nationalists and the Western supporters of them, they were like, this is it. If we allow this guy to do partnership with Russia, they were so afraid of Russia that they thought they have to act now. And, the coup in Ukraine was just a matter of time. Like, they were planning for a while to do a coup. And, they were doing everything they can, sponsoring these right sector. Azov came later. Azov was formed in 2015. But there was Svoboda Party with this infamous guy, Oleg Tyahnybok, which you have tons of pictures online of him going Heil Hitler. Like, he's demonstrating that. I think it's one of their greetings.
Yeah, his quotes are absurd. They're talking Jews and Untermensch and stuff like that.
Yeah. You hear a quote of him saying the Ukrainians lead the white races.
Yeah, something like that. The Jewish must have.
Yeah, and remember Victoria Nuland, this maiden of Maidan? Because she was giving out cookies. So now she has a nickname, Maiden of Maidan. Well, she told US Congress when she was asked how much money they have spent on Ukraine, she said $5 billion. And I think she's underestimating.
Underestimation, yeah.
And by the way, she mentioned this Oleg Tyahnybok in that infamous phone call that was leaked, remember? She was talking, I forgot who she was talking to, but she was mentioning Oleg Tyahnybok in that phone call, and then she said in the end, no, we want that Yats guy. And she meant Yatsenyuk. And sure enough, after the Maidan finished, the coup was over, Yatsenyuk became one of the leading positions. So her words came true. So we actually see from her phone call who rules.
I remember watching this video today of Sarah Ashton or whatever. She was trolled by this one Russian who was pretending to be who's literally pretending to be Poroshenko, and she wasn't being, she didn't know she was being recorded, but
Yeah, she fell for it.
She literally thought she was talking to Poroshenko, and then she asked, and then Poroshenko, the supposed Poroshenko, literally asked like, why were you terminated? And then she says it came from the highest level, and then he asked like, what do you mean by the highest level? And she said New York City.
Wow, I didn't know that actually.
And the highest level of Ukraine is New York City.
Yeah, Poroshenko is another like weird character in Ukrainian history. He was literally an oligarch. He looted Ukraine in 90s. He just privatized state enterprises. He started this chocolate. He's known as chocolate oligarch. There's like chocolates and sweets even sold here in Chicago in like Ukrainian stores with his name on it, Roshen. He picked the middle of his last name and he called his company Roshen. Yeah, so he's really nationalist and he was so strong. After the coup happened, there was like a temporary government and then they elected a new president and Poroshenko became that new president. And in the east, after the coup, Eastern Ukrainians, they didn't want this new government because, I mean, it's a threat.
Mm-hmm.
They were threatening to close all the schools in Russian, to prohibit them speaking Russian, teaching Russian. It's just like, it's crazy. Even in the United States, they allow all of that. Like, we're so, there's the diasporas and communities of any kind. But in Ukraine, they're like, no, it has to be Ukrainian, and this is it. So there were lots of protests in the East. People didn't like the outcome of the coup. And Ukraine, of course, just ignored it. They're like, who cares? So Donetsk and Luhansk decided to hold referendums and they decided to declare independence because people overwhelmingly voted to become independent. That was people's will. That's what they wanted the most. So, of course, the Ukrainian government didn't like that and they announced a war. They called it anti-terrorist operation. So, right now, they're mad that Putin is calling it special military operation. Well, you started it. You called them terrorists. And you said you're going on them as anti-terrorist operation. And Ukrainian army had very little enthusiasm to fight with the Eastern Ukrainians. They didn't want to go and kill their own people. We were part of the same country for many years. So Ukrainian government had to form these new National Guard units. And can you guess who went in those National Guard units? Yeah, all the right sector, all of those they have been training them for 20 plus years. All those kids, my classmates who grew up, who attended those camps, summer camps. One of such guys was called Andrei Biletsky. He's the leader of, he used to be the leader of Azov battalion. And he's so famous for his quotes where he said that Ukraine's national purpose was to get rid of Jews and other inferior races. So you can clearly see what was the point of the anti-terrorist operation.
We must defend democracy.
Ironically, the Ukrainian oligarch and former governor of Dnipropetrovsk, Kolomoisky, he is Jewish. And he was sponsoring not only Azov, Right Sector, and others. He was using them, I guess, as his own personal militia. Oligarchs need that. I mean, if you want to take over factory, you need militia.
Neo-Nazis.
Yes. But it's so ridiculous. They say, how can Ukraine be fascist? They have Jewish president. They have Jewish people in there, in position, Well, yeah, Jewish oligarch was sponsoring Nazis. It's a common thing in Ukraine. It's normal. Yeah, so after the coup, of course, they went with the IMF loan. So they didn't continue that deal that Yanukovych was trying to make with Russia. They're like, no, IMF is better. So they got those $40 billion. And as part of the deal, they privatized over 300 of state enterprises. They privatized healthcare. That was the beginning of the privatization. Like before, we used to have free healthcare. You didn't have to pay when you go to the doctor. Now in Ukraine, it's just like in the United States. You need to have insurance and all that. Capitalism. Also, what's so weird is they closed down like 60% of universities. So they don't want people to learn the history and know what's happening. They decided to just close it down. And I'm sure these oligarchs in Ukraine, they're happy because they got to own all the enterprises. They turned them all into businesses. But unfortunately, because of that, the living standards of the working class really went down in the last 10 years. And also because of the civil war that was happening, which was, it's not good for any country to be in the state of war. Lots of resources that otherwise would have been spent on people now went to fuel this killing of Donbass residents. And also what interesting they were doing, in 2015, they formed an international peacekeeping and security center in the western Ukraine by Polish border. And that's basically where United States and NATO were training Ukrainian forces and also all these right-wing nationalists. I think some sources say they trained over 35,000 of such militants over there. And the funny that they were calling that project Operation Unifier. So they were training them to kill Donbass residents, but they were calling it Unifier. So basically they just wanted to unify the land, but not the people.
No people.
No people.
Yeah, get us land.
A land without a people.
Yeah, and this has been going on for years, from 2015. Poroshenko was really happy with everything. He had contact established with the West. And in 2019, there was another elections coming up. So Zelensky enters the room. And people thought he's the savior because he's not a politician. He's a comedian, actor. He owned this studio, Kvartal 95, where he produced like comedy shows, movies, and he even played in one such movies. Like it was TV series, like a TV show called Servant of the People, where he played this role of a humble teacher, history teacher, who was just so mad at the politicians, and he was just ranting, saying, "Oh, I hate what they're doing is crazy. If I was the president, I would do this, and that." And he was like swearing in his rant, and his students filmed him ranting to another teacher, and they posted online and went viral, and supposedly he became famous, and they made him a president. Well, people got inspired by this TV role, and they thought, well, maybe he's gonna do that in real life. So let's elect him a president. So Kolomoisky, that Jewish oligarch, started sponsoring Zelensky's campaign. And I understand why people fell for his promises, because he was really running as peace candidate. People were getting tired of the war, so they were like, he was promising to end it. He was promising he's going to obey, listen to the Minsk agreements. He's not going to break the ceasefires. And unfortunately, he didn't keep any of his promises. When he became president, he even tried to go there and talk to those guys in trenches. They put him down so easy. They told him, "Who are you? A clown." Like there's a video of these Nazi guys calling Zelensky a clown. So he couldn't do anything. I don't know if he wanted to do something and they didn't allow him, or from the beginning, this was just a show. He was just playing another role. He thought it's the season 5 of his Servant of the People.
Isn't that also the name of his party?
I'm sorry?
The name of his party is
Yes,
also...
yes, his party. And he brought people that he was, the comedians that were working together with him, he brought them into his cabinet. So the whole cabinet, people were joking, they're like, "Oh, we're gonna laugh a lot for the next 5 years." Because the whole whole cabinet is the comedians.
I just wanted to add also, I remember when Zelensky was elected, and I was in Lugansk and Donetsk at the time, and I have to say, Donbass fell for it too. They were in love with Zelensky at the beginning. They thought he was going to be the end of the conflict.
Yeah.
Little did we know.
73 people voted for him. That's a lot. Usually it's like 40 over 50, right? It's like they're bordering the two candidates, like, and Zelensky was, I think, one of the only who ever got like 73%. That's huge. That's a lot. Yeah. So even before Zelensky came to power in Ukraine, the anti-communist movement started growing. You know, they started eliminating everything communist. So they banned communist symbols. In 2015, they passed a law that you can go to jail for something like selling USSR souvenirs. Like if you have any, like, you know, any souvenir, you can go to jail for 5 years. Also, if you want to like sing Soviet anthem, that's also banned. It's criminal offense if you do not denounce communism. So if you're like saying you're pro-communism, you're criminal automatically. So I would be in jail if I was in Ukraine now. Yeah, so it's basically like ban on free speech, and also on the other hand, they made it a criminal offense if you say that Bandera and those Nazi collaborators were actually Nazi collaborators. So you can't say it out loud that they were the bad guys. Officially, in Ukrainian history books and as a narrative, they are independence fighters. And also, in the past 5 years, streets started being renamed. Like I think over 50,000 streets were renamed from, like, they were Stalin Street, Lenin Street, anything that was related to communism, even Gagarin. So Gagarin Street, they started getting rid of Gagarin Street. And right now, I mean, they replaced it with Shukhevich, Bandera, and others.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's funny, they started removing all the monuments. And there was a poll done in 2016 where they were asking people, do you approve all these changes? And majority of people, over 50% of people said, no, it's nonsense. Keep it the way it is. It's history. So Ukrainians don't even agree with that, but they keep on going. They keep on changing. Instead of fixing potholes, they're changing the name. Like, what's the use for that? And also, ever since the special military operation started, they really went after the workers. So because there's a martial law imposed in Ukraine right now, no demonstrations are allowed. Unions that represent workers from small and medium corporations, which account for like 80% of the whole Ukraine, they can't bargain, they can't negotiate their terms of work. So workers basically have to just put up with this fascist regime and wait when they're going to be drafted. Because this is what the democratic Ukraine looks now, right now. It's opposition parties are prohibited. No elections. Zelensky will be the forever president.
Yeah.
Ukrainian police just arrests everyone who has a critical opinion. Neo-Nazi gangs just rule the streets. They can do whatever they want because they're independence fighters. Churches are being taken over. I'm sure you've heard about Kyivo-Pечерska Lavra or Louvre, I'm not sure how to say. Yeah. They just took over it and they kicked out the priests. It's ridiculous. People are tied to lampposts. I'm sure you've seen pictures like that. Men are being pulled out of cars. Buses are being stopped by police, and police goes in and gets every man out and checks their papers. And if they're old enough or healthy enough to go fight, they send them to fight. So I was born in USSR, but I was growing up mostly when it was independent Ukraine, and it hurts so much to see how it changed. It went from this beautiful country where Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking people were living in peace and harmony, and now they are the biggest enemies. They're fighting, and they want to, especially the Westerners, they just hate everything Russian. and they call them terrorists and they want to exterminate them. And it's just basically like fascism is spreading like a cancer, you know? So I often ask this question when it makes me sad, you know, the situation in my home country. I feel like if anyone gets cancer, who are we going to be mad at? The surgeon who's cutting out the tumor or the cancer? So that's how I look at the situation in Ukraine right now.
Very good.
You mentioned the anti-communist laws passed in Ukraine in 2015. That reminded me, actually, I watched the first few episodes of Zelensky's show, Servant of the People. It was actually pretty entertaining. I can see how it was such effective propaganda. And there was one scene that I remember where he was in this boardroom, there were all these politicians around him, and then he was having this vision of Che Guevara telling him, just like, tell all these politicians that they aren't doing shit for the people, deserve the power they have and all that. And then of course in the end he just decided to chicken out and say, hey, it's good to meet all of you and all that. So it's like, I believe the show came out in about 2015, something like that. So Zelensky's show could appeal to revolutionary history, be like, like Che is your good conscience telling you to call out corruption and all that. Meanwhile, people are being criminalized for selling Soviet memorabilia.
Yeah.
You probably get arrested for wearing a Che shirt in Ukraine.
Zelensky was like the director of another show that every Russian knows. Like it became super popular in Russia called Swаты. It's in-laws. It's like a show about one side of the family's from the city, the other side of the family's from the village, and like they have like silly conflicts and stuff. And there's a whole season where the one guy, the dad from the village family, creates like a communist, like a collective farm. it actually glorifies like the Soviet Union in this show. This is why it's like even Russians are in shock that Zelensky went down the path that he did. It's like everyone knows that show. It's actually really
Zelensky
good.
was never actually in charge. He was just pushed down a certain path.
I think that's most likely.
People were believing that he's not after money because he has everything he needs now. He has fame, he has money, so they were like, okay, let's allow somebody like that come to power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask, like, I mean, it's probably hard to say, but to what degree do you think, this latest rendition of mythological nationhood has taken root? I mean, you see some wild shit being said, and I can't imagine that everybody thinks, ancient Ukrainians dug up the Black Sea or werewolves and couldn't die. But you do get the impression that, like, especially in the West, it's pretty rooted now.
Yeah.
What do you think, is that true?
It is.
Long term,
Unfortunately, it's really, these nationalists, they have co-opted Ukrainian identity. So Ukrainian folk songs, traditions, everything now is associated with nationalism, unfortunately. It has nothing to do with it, but they married it together. So now, old song from like 17th century is because Nazis, these fascists have used it. Now you can't sing it anymore because you're being associated with them. You see what they did? They ruined basically Ukrainian identity. And it's so hard because, I love Ukraine. I love my people. I love traditions. So it hurts to see that happening. And especially because here in Chicago, the diaspora is so strong, and majority of that diaspora is formed with those Nazi collaborators who escaped here, and then the relatives who came on top of it. And so I don't know anybody in Chicago who is Ukrainian and who has position like I do. Every time I speak to someone, they're pro-Ukraine. As soon as I see someone Ukrainian, they say Slava Ukraini.
One colleague of mine is also Ukrainian, and he also talks against the war. And I guess this
I would love to meet some Ukrainians who all my friends, everybody, relatives, my family, My mom, she comes here, but the rest of my family, they're still in Ukraine. And unfortunately, my dad and my brother, they're there. They can't leave the country. They're prohibited to leave. So, like, we had the paperwork ready for them. They could have, you know, they could have lived, but Ukraine said no. All men from 18 to 60 can't leave. And now they have extended it to 65. Now they want women not to leave. Women who have like medical education, they're like, no, you can't leave the country. You might be needed here. So that's the democracy that they're talking here about.
And at the same time, I'd also like to add that Russia actually, Vladimir Putin passed an executive order that allows Ukrainians to enter Russia without any visas just recently. So like the kind of anti-Russian sentiment that exists in Ukraine, the reverse is nowhere to be found in Russia. Like if there are Ukrainians all over the place and nobody's discriminated against. I mean, this was passed so that it's easier for Ukrainians to move to Russia and seek refuge. Like, despite the fact that it's going to make it easier for like saboteurs to enter the country and I don't know, launch drones near Moscow or whatever. But it just goes to show you like the mentality of the Russian government towards that situation and the mentality of the Ukrainian one.
Yeah, and opposite to that, in the United States, they scream around, welcome refugees, all the poor and tired, come here, we'll help you. But if you really want to come, you have to jump through hoops.
Yeah.
You actually, if you're Ukrainian and you want to come to the United States, you can apply for the refugee, but you need to have a sponsor. You can't just come like, you know, regularly and ask for asylum here. No. This spring I had some relatives who were messaging me, calling me, Slava, help, we want to come, we don't want to be drafted. It's two young boys, they didn't want to go and die for nothing. So in order to become a sponsor, you have to like show that you're capable of helping this, that, like there's so many requirements and nobody knows about it. People think that United States is just so like helping everyone and just giving them everything they need. No, it's not like that. They create an illusion of this, but in reality, they're not helping. All these people who are coming here from Ukraine, they had to find someone who will become basically responsible for them.
I went to Romania last year and I saw a lot of Ukrainians like refugees. This year, I did not see any Ukrainian in Timișoara, in my city.
Because they were using Romania as just a transition post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should probably move on.
Yeah.
We've moved 15 minutes over time, but
Sorry.
anyway.
I let it go because it's very
Yeah, we could just end 15 minutes later. I didn't want to stop it. It was very interesting what you were talking about, and I'm sure a lot of people had questions. So, but yeah, thank you very much, Slava. So next we have Edward from Midwestern Marks. So he's going to give a talk, and I'm really interested to hear it. So.
Oh, okay, for sure, no worries. Yeah, thank you all for having me and for putting this on. I'm totally honored.
Thanks for coming.
For sure. I wanted to start just by quoting Hugo Chavez and condemning Israel from the bottom of my soul. And, free Palestine, so solidarity with them right now with everything going on. And it's interesting that Zelensky and the Atlantic Council, which is basically a mouthpiece for the military-industrial complex, have talked about turning Ukraine into a big Israel. That's their plan, is turning it into an apartheid state that's constantly at war and a constant source of revenue for the military-industrial complex. So, thanks to Slava for that amazing history lesson. We know that the bourgeoisie and the bourgeois press, in order to lie about these things, they have to isolate events from the historical factors that created them. Right, so I've never seen anyone go that far back in the history, but that helps debunk the lies. You know, like they have to say this conflict started in 2022 in order to lie about it. Because if you go back even in 2014, you start to see the influence of Nazism Banderism and U.S.-backed Banderism. Although I had a debate with the popular political streamer Vaush recently, and he informed me that there are actually no Nazis in Ukraine. So you've all been deceived by Putin propaganda, and I'm sorry to tell you. I've actually met a handful of Ukrainian refugees recently through wrestling. They keep coming over. The first one I met has been here for a while. I didn't know how to start a conversation with him, so I just asked, are you from Western or Eastern Ukraine? He goes, Western Ukraine, where the Patriots are. I'm like, okay.
All right, that's it.
I'm not going to take that conversation any further. But then actually I met another kid who wrestled on the Wisconsin national team with us from Ukraine. It was from Zaporozhye. And he had a totally different perspective. He spoke very highly of the Soviet Union. I went on a walk with him before the tournament because he liked to do that, and he was explaining like the Americans don't like to walk, and your guys' infrastructure isn't set up for walking. It's built for cars, and he's like the Soviet Union built all this public transportation, all these walking paths. It was really interesting to hear. And then recently I met one more refugee who had to pay the Armenian mob. He said I didn't get the full story, but he had to pay him $7,000 3 separate times to sneak him out of Ukraine, and now he's coaching wrestling in Minneapolis. So pretty wild how it's come home. Also, I went home to see my parents the other day. They live in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and there is a Ukrainian camp funded by a Ukrainian millionaire in Chicago with a statue of Stefan Bandera. And it's like one of these youth camps where they're indoctrinating kids with banderism. And actually, there was a controversy in Baraboo a while ago where kids took a homecoming picture doing the Sieg Heil, like the Hail Hitler, and you gotta wonder if there's some kind of connection there. Yeah, I wanted to say Alexander McKay's speech was amazing. I learned a whole bunch about Europe from that, which I appreciate. It's a dream come true to hear from Jeff Munson. This is the first time I've been at a political event where there's someone else with cauliflower ear. That's really encouraging. It's hard to convince combat sports athletes to be Russophobic because you grow up your whole life watching these amazing Russian combat sports athletes. And it's like you can't convince me that the country that produced Buvaisar Satiev, Fedor Emelianenko, and Alexander Karelin are inferior to Americans. I watched them beat up Americans my entire life. Doesn't make any sense.
But what about?
I also liked hearing Jeff. It's always interesting hearing people in Russia talk about the pro-Soviet sentiment there. People do miss the economic benefits, you know, the free daycare, the free health care, the education, but what they all talk about is that sort of socialistic culture and how it's a different way of being where you help each other and you care about each other, and in our rugged individualist society, that just sounds so incredible, you know. Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit today about multipolarity and what that means for socialism and the possibility of socialism around the world. Obviously, we've seen a string of anti-colonial coups now in Africa, which people mentioned in Mali, Burkina Faso, and elsewhere. And some of those coups, the people were waving around Russian and Chinese flags, which was really interesting. And I think we can learn a lot looking at the Cuban Revolution and the way that Fidel Castro was originally a Cuban nationalist. And eventually, he had to declare the revolution to be socialist in character, because you realize there's no real independence without socialism, which is obviously something Che Guevara and Raul Castro were saying from the beginning. But how do you have independence when your mines, your factories, and your farmland are owned by Western multinationals? You can't. There can only be true independence through socialism. And I think that's what a lot of these countries are going to realize as they try and kick out the Western imperialism as things develop. I mean, that's what Libya realized under Gaddafi, and that's the kind of system they were moving towards, giving people education, owning their own farmland, giving it to the people, giving the people tools to start farms. And we know that NATO partially killed Gaddafi because he was moving towards currency independence. So neocolonialism is really the continued economic domination of these countries, and you can't free yourself from neocolonialism without economic independence in the era of capitalist imperialism. The U.S.-dominated global financial system, or the Bretton Woods system, that centers around the IMF and the World Bank that were created in 1944. Obviously in 1914 or when was imperialism published? Was it 1917 or 1914?
17.
16? Okay. Anyway, Lenin describes capitalist imperialism, that capitalism has reached this new stage dominated by finance capital, where capitalists will go abroad and try and super exploit countries. And The Bretton Woods system, the IMF and World Bank are really an outgrowth of that. They're tools that the finance capitalists use to assert their dominance and control other countries. So without freedom from that Bretton Woods system, from that US-dominated global financial system, there's no real independence and there's no real sovereignty. And then IMF and World Bank are obviously, they have thousands of subsidiary banks, which are everywhere. And the power of those financial institutions, though, are ultimately backed up by the barrel of a gun. You know, that's why the U.S. maintains thousands of nearly 1,000 military bases and all these military agreements. And you can see that with the way that they enforce the blockade on Cuba and the sanctions on Venezuela. Like, yes, they're financial sanctions that a lot of countries have to follow, and the European countries just follow them because they side with the U.S. like puppets. But like when Iran tried to send oil to Venezuela against the wishes of the U.S., the oil was intercepted by the U.S. Navy, and they basically pirated it. They took it back to Houston. So, perfect example here of how the U.S. is using economic warfare and financial warfare, but ultimately it's backed up by military force. Another good example of the way that economic independence is needed for true independence is Iran. A country that's not a socialist country, but who had an Islamic revolution in 1979 that was highly driven by resentment against the West and the Western-backed Shah. And we've seen that they still don't call themselves socialists, but all of their banks are in state hands, right? 70% of their industry is in the hands of the state. They're using central economic planning and forging closer ties with Russia, China. They've had to move towards a socialistic style of economics in order to maintain independence and maintain their sovereignty. And I imagine similar things will be happening in Africa soon. We'll see how they develop and the way that the West reacts to what's been going on. But yeah, and I'd also like to touch on BRICS and the role that BRICS is playing in developing the productive forces of countries where imperialism has arrested them. And prevented them from developing, because it's the orthodox Marxist view that it's the advancement of the productive forces that ultimately causes the relations of production to burst asunder, and we can move to a new era, a new social system. So Marx says in the manifesto, talking about how feudalism transformed into capitalism in Europe, he said, in one word, the feudal relations of property became no longer compatible with the already developed productive forces. They became so many fetters. They had to burst asunder, and they were burst asunder. Into their place stepped free competition, accompanied by a social and political constitution adapted in it, and the economic and political sway of the bourgeois class. So it was originally the view that nations had to go through a period of capitalist development where the productive forces are advanced in order to create the conditions for socialism to come about. But what Lenin notices in his book Imperialism is that in countries targeted by imperialism, the productive forces are prevented from developing, and they're held in this sort of semi-feudal state, and that's where you get the worker-peasant alliance from, him saying we need to work together with the peasants and then immediately develop our productive forces after the revolution. And Maoists and other leftist ultras have criticized China to their adherence of a foreign policy of complete non-interventionism and completely not messing with the politics of other countries, because these ultras would like China to export revolution, and try and do the same thing that the USSR did. But that's not how China sees their role in 2023. They are not here to export revolution and create unnecessary problems with the US. But what they are doing is helping countries, especially countries targeted by imperialism, develop their productive forces. And in doing so, they're bringing millions of people out of poverty, and they're creating the preconditions for socialism. So we'll help you develop, and then if you want to have a socialist revolution, go for it. But we're not going to export revolution. We're not going to mess with your politics. And it's really hopeful to see that, and really great to see what China's doing. And the people who sit in the West, in the belly of the beast, in the heart of the empire, and just carry water for imperialist narratives about China, it's completely ridiculous. And Russia, of course. But yeah, to quote even Noam Chomsky about China, he said it's driving the U.S. crazy because they can't do anything about it. China's just investing and building, investing and building, and they're playing the long game. Yeah, so lastly, I just want to talk about what Americans can do to help usher in this era of multipolarity and eventually global socialism. One, stop buying into corporate media propaganda about Russia and China. And if you do, just stop calling yourself a socialist, please. More difficult for the rest of us who know what's going on in the world. If you're a socialist in 2023 living in the US, no reason to carry water for imperialist talking points, like I said. Another thing that I think is important to recognize, as much as I like BRICS and what China's doing, it's not a cure-all. Vijay Prashad has said we shouldn't be overly optimistic about what China's doing because the world is still dominated by the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bretton Woods system. And it's going to take a long time before, an alternative system can overtake that. We're still a long way off from China, Russia, and BRICS overtaking the IMF and World Bank as the most powerful financial institutions in the world. So meaning revolution is still important. Point number 3, China doesn't export revolution, but revolution is still important and it still moves us closer to multipolarity. There's a reason that the capitalist imperialists have invested so much money in destroying Cuba and the Bolivarian Republic in Venezuela. Because these are countries who threw off the shackles of Western economic dominance, who are right in the backyard of the United States. There's a reason that France and the corporate media had a meltdown over the anti-colonial coups in Africa that booted out Western military presence. It's because these events weaken the empire and they move us closer to a multipolar world, right? So it's not just China's investment in BRICS and what China's doing. There's still a place for revolution. And there's still a place for socialists to rise up, and that's what China sees their role as. We'll help you develop your productive forces, but figure out your own politics. Which leads me to my final point. The number one thing that Americans can do to usher in the era of multipolarity is to have a revolution here at home. And an American revolution might seem far-fetched at this point, but it's on American socialists. The onus is on us to educate the working class and make it happen. It's got to start somewhere. It's not like there hasn't been a revolution before in this country. There was the revolution against the British that established independence. There was the Civil War that moved the South away from this bourgeois slavery mode of production and towards capitalism. We have a revolutionary history. If you think revolution's impossible, I'd like to point out that in 2022, the US government forced TikTok to the social media app to hand over management of their American servers to a company called Oracle based in Texas with very deep ties to the State Department and the CIA. So Oracle proceeded to hire a bunch of NATO operatives, a bunch of national security agents, and 320,000 accounts were banned, including ours that had amassed nearly 400,000 followers. An explicitly Marxist-Leninist account in the Midwest, which a lot of people think is completely anti-communist, although I'd argue it's not, just wiped that out. So I would say, if the ruling class thought revolution was far-fetched and impossible, why would they spend so much time, money, and effort trying to suppress us and trying to suppress education? If they think it's possible, then we should think it's possible as well.
That's right.
So the American ruling class knows that there's a crisis of legitimacy in this country, where only 17% of people support Congress, while 80% of them are living paycheck to paycheck. Most people are drowning in debt placed upon them by the richest people in society. 60% of Americans experience medical debt at some point, which is crazy that our healthcare system is better at trapping you in debt than it is at making you well. So the idea that we can't organize people against this system is fucking crazy. I'm sorry, it just is. Most people know that the government's screwing them. They might be a little bit scared of the words communism and socialism, but that's the role of having conversations, and that's the role of education. That's our job as Americans. It's also realizing that not everyone's going to agree with you on everything. Not everyone's going to have the exact same views on pronouns or who should be able to compete in what sports divisions. But most people can agree that poor people are getting screwed by this economic system. And the only people that this economic system is working for is the richest in society, who have made their money by exploiting the rest of us. So if we focus on that and organize people based on class, we can absolutely organize a revolution in this country, or a revolutionary movement. And then we'll bring an end to the unipolar US-dominated world forever. I mean, there's a story Carlos tells. I can't remember. Carlos runs Midwestern Marx with me. I can't remember who it was, but there was some American socialist who went to some socialist country. It was Cuba or whatever, and he asked the revolutionaries, "What can I do? What can I do to help?" They say go home and have a revolution in America.
Yeah.
Go overthrow your imperialist government that's robbing us. That we're in the most anti-communist country in the world, but we also have the greatest imperative to overthrow our anti-communist ruling class. But it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of strategy, a lot of solidarity, and a lot of cooperation to do it, which part of the reason we founded Midwestern Marx is because we see those aspects missing from the current American left, which is very individualistic, hyper-focused on social issues, and does what Michael Parenti called ABC theorizing, anything but class. They'll talk about anything but the class struggle. I just want to add also, I couldn't agree more with the idea that Donald expressed about communists being upstanding members of their community and engaging in sort of personal development. And one of the ideas my buddy Carlos has expressed is that we need to develop some sort of socialist virtue ethic, some sort of idea that, personal development is good, being an upstanding member of your community is good, and by doing that and treating people with respect is how you're going to gain their trust and how you're going to get them to listen to you when you talk about things. You don't need to beat them over the head with communism, but earn people's respect, treat them well, be a competent person, and they'll listen to you. I have a good buddy who became a much better communist after he read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. He didn't like Jordan's politics, but he started cleaning his room, making his bed. He was a better organizer after that. It just is what it is, right? So, that's all I have to say. There's still a place for revolution in 21st century socialism, and the onus is on us to create a revolution here in the U.S. So, sorry I was short. I'm used to TikTok videos.
Maybe we should do some streams about this idea of like socialist virtue ethics, because I completely agree.
I agree.
I've been reading a lot of Stoic philosophy, and I feel like there are so many parallels between that and what like the Bolsheviks were saying about people and communists and throughout the Soviet Union too. I think there's a lot of correlation there. We could talk about it on streams.
I would love to do that. I had some wrestlers who would ask me about communism, and one of the things, or they would just ask me about philosophy, and a lot of the times I'd start them with the meditations.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Huge.
And they kind of got used to reading philosophy through that.
Yeah.
I can introduce them to other stuff, but there's a lot of overlap.
Tons.
A lot.
It's a really good philosophy.
For sure.
Yeah, I would agree. Like socialist personal ethic, I would absolutely love to work with both you and Don on this. Like both in like my personal experiences, like I started getting better at being a communist once I started going to the gym multiple times a week and all that. It's like one thing, it's like of course I can, like I'm stronger, I can help people out with things. Like I'm the only person at work who can refill the water dispenser. So it's like people are more likely to find you like approachable because you're more physically capable of helping them. And also it helps with your mental health because there's this bourgeois idea that the mind and the body are separate. That could not be further.
Not true.
It's all connected, and like, I remember I saw one person post something about how the best thing that they personally did for their mental health was fire their therapist and hire a personal trainer. It's like exercise, it gets you out of that anxiety and all that, and gets you to like focus on like making yourself stronger and everything. So it's really good for that. And I really like that speech.
I saw a quote the other day. It was like from an ancient philosopher. I don't remember which one, but it was something along the lines of a society that doesn't think it's important for the military to be educated and the intelligentsia to be strong will have a country of like moronic soldiers and cowardly intellectuals.
True, yeah. It's America. Civilize the mind, make savage the body. Mao's study on physical education hits on a lot of these topics that we're discussing. I mean, how can you help other people and build other people up if you don't respect yourself and love yourself?
Correct, of course.
What do you ever call because you know how liberals, when something positive is being, working out and all that, they say, "Oh, you're fat shaming."
You're aimless.
Anybody ever told you that?
The most ridiculous one I had was a girl told me that by exercising, I was promoting fascist gender norms. I don't even know what to say to that one. Okay. Right, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
I have a question on like BRICS. Your thoughts on something?
Yeah.
I'll preface it by saying like I think that the thing that's made the dollarization so dominant is that America's like so ruthless about it, and like keeping like NATO in line and the EU in line. Like if Macron wanted to change his ways, he'd be out, and then somebody else would be in. And the thing that worries me about BRICS is that they do respect each other's sovereignty so much that I'm worried that we do get like a BRICS currency or something like that, and especially with this guy in Argentina, Milieu, I don't know how to say his name really. And it's like, I'm just worried that they respect each other's sovereignty so much that they won't step in and stop something like that, and then I could see like the BRICS currency kind of like having a crisis if a country like Argentina just like backtracks and goes dollarization. So that's something that worries me is that like, I hate to say that it's like a weakness, like respecting your other country's partner's sovereignty, but then when you're going against someone like that's as ruthless as the United States, I kind of see it as like, I just don't know how to like reconcile that. Really.
Especially when the U.S. doesn't even care about the sovereignty.
They don't care, yeah, they'll do whatever it takes, but I can see like if China, I don't see China and Russia like sending in coups to Argentina to bring back whoever is like supporting BRICS.
Right.
So I'm just curious on that, yeah.
Like the BRICS currency is still a minute away, at least like now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm just
immediate.
worried in the future that it's something like that could happen.
I've heard that concern raised before, and it's a good one. I mean, that some people have argued, I can't remember if it was Michael Hudson or Vijay Prashad said this, but they were saying there needs to be at least some kind of coherent ideology connecting the BRICS countries. That was what they suggested. I mean, it's a problem that they're going to probably have to deal with practically here eventually, but yeah, I don't have a
Guess
very
we'll
good
find out what
answer.
happens.
Right.
It's like BRICS' ideology has become more coherent, not less. Because it's like BRICS 3 years ago. Look at like just the letters in BRICS: Brazil, India, China, Russia. So back then, Brazil had Bolsonaro, and India has Modi. So it's like then you have China, which has so it was, I would argue it's more coherent now. Because first of all, Russia shifted in a different direction than it was. Like Russia was like, you know, even after Crimea, Russia was still sort of pro-Western, but only in like just in a lesser context. But now it's like BRICS is more coherent. I wouldn't say it's socialist, but like the people who are in BRICS are definitely some sort of like economic interventionist, and it's definitely like not in favor of globalization. So it's like
Maybe they've had to form a more coherent ideology as it's developed. You know,
well, I think
so
the ideology
because
is
of,
developing on its own. So
right, because of the practical necessity of
Yeah.
doing so.
like as Marxists, we understand that like all ideology is like rooted in like material reality.
Exactly.
It's why you don't just call yourself like like a national anarchist.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, because I think what you guys are doing through Western Mars, I don't know that there's any other outlet like what you guys do, or the line that you take. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know, what are some of the biggest things you think you've learned, or important takeaways from like the success that you guys have had, or the different platforms that you've tried? Like, what would you say there?
Yeah, I have a lot on that. I mean, it's weird, like TikTok seems so goofy. It seems like a children's dancing app, but nothing we do brings in the views of TikTok. It's insane. The way the algorithm works, it helps you spread. I would recommend, if you're gonna try and replicate what we're doing, use TikTok to funnel people somewhere else, because we've had 7 accounts banned now. So now we have 2 accounts which are both back up to 50,000 followers, but that was very difficult. And when we had that account with 400,000 followers, it was very easy to push people to YouTube, and should have done more of that. So I would say,
Rumble account.
yeah, right, give people the Rumble or something. But
Because YouTube's gonna do it to you one day too.
Yeah, I'm sure they
just
will.
deleted all Jackson's videos. Like, all at
I
once
just saw that.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Dude, it must have been painful to lose that 400,000 subscribers.
It was brutal. No. I took a long break from TikTok, but
I guess you could also use Kick.
Yeah, true. Kick is basically like the Rumble of Twitch, right?
It's like off-brand.
One thing I've noticed too is like, just don't get caught up engaging in these polemics on Twitter. Like, it's not that useful. It's usually not that productive, and it's like, when you scroll through Twitter, sometimes you feel like everything needs your opinion, right? Like, oh, I don't agree with that. Let me say something. Let me say something. It just becomes a time suck, right? And there
Go to
was
the gym.
right.
Spend it at the gym. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a good organizer who told Carlos and I, he was just like, I love what you guys are doing, but quit engaging in polemics and fights on Twitter. Just focus on pushing your line. There's a time and a place to call people out, you know, if they're saying something heinous or if you're having a legitimate, constructive debate. But a lot of the stuff on Twitter is just a useless freaking time suck. So I've definitely learned that too. And avoid unnecessary splits. Like, there's so many people I see fighting on Twitter. Like, I hate you, I'm blocking you. You guys agree on 99.9% of stuff.
Yeah. There's a chart on Marxist.org for all the Trotskyist splits in America.
See that? Yeah. That's a pretty funny chart.
Half of those groups have Twitter accounts. You should check those out.
Fighting each other.
We want some entertainment at the gym.
Right.
Question, just maybe some thoughts for everybody really about the anything but class type of organizing. I see it's getting really prevalent, especially like younger folks coming out of college who are calling themselves Marxists and really organizing it around, like, so Brent, you said that? Anything about class.
Yeah.
And it's obviously like a way for the ruling class to divide everybody. But these people can't see it yet. I don't know if it's a lost cause. They're like, what? I'm having trouble finding ways in my own interactions with people, like trying to convince people, hey, it's class first, because then we'll get liberation for everybody. You can't go the other way. But just interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it is a lost cause. Sometimes people just have to get into these organizing spaces and see it for themselves and kind of grow up. And it is a lot of students, and unfortunately, a lot of the communist organizations in the U.S. are pushing people towards what we've started calling in Midwestern Marx activist brain.
No kidding.
You just go to protests with people who already agree with you.
Movementism.
Movementism, exactly, right. So, I don't know, I feel like just using the Marxist method and explaining how everything stems from class and how you can organize based on class. One of the things that my buddy, I was talking to you about earlier, the guy who works on the rail union who turned me into a communist, he's saying, our only social position needs to be tolerance. You know, tolerance for everybody, do what you want, you know, we'll still treat you with respect as long as you're not hurting anyone else, but, you know, we don't need to take it too much farther than that. Yeah, it's a tough issue. I don't know what to do about it actually right now. You can go. Sorry, I don't know.
Sure. So I found as far as like the people really caught up in these anything but class issues is like some of them can be led to class analysis, but not all. You really have to pick and choose your battles there. And like, let's say for example, like with Black Lives Matter or something, there were a lot of people that felt very mobilized by that and everything. So I point out to them, it's like, has anything gotten materially better for the vast majority of Black people since 2020? No, it hasn't. There have just been like more DEI seminars for like various corporations and in your university and everything, and like a handful of professional activists got some mansions that own the Black Lives Matter NGO.
Are you trying to say Ibram X. Kendi didn't solve racism? Robin DiAngelo?
Angela Davis has a plan for communism. What you do is that you give her all the money and she'll keep it in a safe place.
I agree. I would just always try to go to those rallies and raise the property question. You know, be like, look at the prison industrial complex. The reason the police are so racist and brutal towards poor people is, one, they're an armed body of the state that serves as a tool of class suppression, and then they're making tons of money off of prison labor, you know, for keeping the prisons filled with bodies. It all comes back to them making money off of this and exploitation.
And the anything but class people need to understand that. I mean, I think you said earlier that having a class line doesn't mean rejecting marginalized people.
Right. Yeah, I always hear that. You say that let's organize by class, and they're like, how dare you abandon the marginalized? Like, how is making life better for poor people abandoning the marginalized?
Right.
Like, class struggle lifts all boats. So, yeah.
Well, anyway, let's give Eddie another round of applause. We're going to move the schedule around a little bit. I think we'll do the song after our very dear comrade and friend Chris Halali gives his speech. He's from PCUSA, so let's hear what he has to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you all, and it's been a phenomenal time so far. Thank you to the hospitality, Don, Slava, and everybody else. I'll be speaking as of course, for those who know, I'm the International Secretary for the Party of Communist USA, so I hold a very unique position in the movement, in that I interact with international communist parties, government leaders and officials every day throughout the year. And so my speech, of course, will be my own personal opinion. I don't speak on behalf of the party. And so I just want you to know that I'll be giving my perspective on something that on a few things that I think are really key these days. First and foremost, when we speak of multipolarity, the term is a term of art in international relations, but it has become a term highly politicized by some, and connected with different theorists who are maligned and castigated. And so we've seen, for example, when I use the term multipolarity, people are like, you support Alexander Dugin. And I'm like, you know, to be honest, I've read some of his stuff, but Alexander Dugin is not the first one to come up with multipolarity.
Yeah.
First of all, unipolarity already exists as a term of art since, since the 80s and 90s. So the idea that somehow multipolarity is connected to this fourth wave and this ideology that's being pushed by some people, no connection. Multipolarity simply means different centers of power within the world system. And so that's how it should be understood. So starting with that, what do we think about multipolarity? What does multipolarity mean to us? Of course, I have to be honest with you, there are many good and fraternal communist parties and workers' parties that are absolutely antagonistic to the idea of multipolarity. And the position that they take is an orthodox one, in the sense that multipolarity is not the goal is worldwide revolution. Okay, interesting, good, hasn't happened yet. We're waiting. It's like waiting for the Messiah.
Yeah.
We're waiting, we're getting older. So the argument, I believe that's most powerful and fruitful, is that multipolarity gets us one step closer towards a much more just social order, to allow for the development of the forces that can bring about socialism on a world scale. That's it. Simple. I'm not here advocating for a utopian ideal that I won't be able to deliver on. What I can deliver on is how can we allow ourselves to build a much more just and secure and peaceful world order for the betterment of the people. Ultimately, it's not about the various parties we represent or the various parties that we support. It's about humanity. It's about our planet. So whatever can be the best overall, maybe we can think about philosophy, utilitarianism, and some of these ideas. Well, whatever can benefit the majority is good. It's helpful, right? So what about the world movement now that we see? There are 4 key moments that I think are pivotal to understand our contemporary situation and the contemporary reality amongst communists and workers' parties around the world. What are they? Number 1, we start at the beginning, when I was an undergrad. Syria. The Syrian civil war was an enormous moment that split socialist parties and countries, communist parties, and workers' parties. They divided the entire movement. The second, the nature of China. Is China socialist? Is China capitalist? What does it mean, Chinese, or socialism with Chinese characteristics, What does that mean? Can we support it? How do we support it? Or do we outright reject it? The third one, which I think has been the one that has been most maligned, but not really investigated enough, which I myself find really lacking from the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic and its reactions by parties and by people. And the fourth, the Ukraine situation now, the special military operation. Those four key events, there are many others, a variety of different issues, but those four issues have divided parties like I've never seen before. And I've been in the movement even before Occupy Wall Street. Of course, for those who know, I'm a red diaper baby. I'm the fourth generation on my mom's side of the communist parties. So I've seen splits down the line. I've heard of splits from the generation of my grandparents who fought in World War II and in the Greek Civil War. And so today's splits are very interesting and happening much more rapidly. Why? Because of the media. Since this is media and multipolarity, the ability to exchange information, to exchange a tremendous amount of data in a real time, in a rapid pace, has created sectarianism and factionalism unlike any other time before. Because information moved in a slower pace before, and people were much more rooted in their communities. Now that we're much more isolated, atomized, as we were rightly saying, with a real sense of individualism, not in a liberatory sense, that I am a political individual and I want rights, right? I'm a sovereign person. No, in the sense that you all are stuck in your prisons, your homes and apartments. Many of you do not own them. You pay rent. So you are part of a cycle where you have no connections to a community. You have no real organic links to the people around you. In fact, I am confident that most comrades that we know do not know their neighbors. Or they might know them by name, but do not know them well enough to call them in the middle of the night and ask for help.
Yeah. Right.
That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy of the commons, as they say, right? That's a tragedy of our society that has done that not by chance, not by accident, on purpose. Because by doing that, what do? You destroy solidarity, you destroy movements, you destroy communities, you destroy any potential for revolution. Because you don't know the people. How are you going to fight for them? How are you going to give your life for them? You know? You're not. Yeah, exactly. Why would you care? Why would you? Everyone's looking with the phone when somebody's getting injured and somebody's getting attacked.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's looking with the phone. When in fact, in older times, people rush in there.
Yeah.
Hey, come on, what are you doing? Or even today on the playground, you see a kid falling, right? It's not like you were mentioning, right, last night. Like in other parts of the world, like even in Eastern Europe, parents, everybody in the community jump, help the kid, right? Now you don't want to touch the kid. You got a lawsuit coming. They're gonna say something, you know. You don't want to get involved. You see this little person fall off the bars. They start crying and screaming. You don't get involved. That's a failure of our society. It's a failure of humanity. That's what it is. And so when we think about the media, when we think about a multipolar world, when we're thinking about how to build something new, we're gonna really analyze these four cases and say, where are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? Right? And so by doing that, what do we understand? Number one, we understand a tremendous issue with maintaining an orthodox line as if Marxism is a religion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not a religion. It's a social science. It's a method. Methods are adaptable. They change, right? By the way, these are the same people who say trust the science. Science is constantly changing.
Yeah.
There's no one
exactly.
set. There's no one set. Somebody said the earth is the center. Then, centuries later, well, wait a minute, the sun is the center. Then, of course, we have atoms. Oh, wait, quantum mechanics. It's constantly changing, adapting. We have to adapt ourselves. Or we go the way of the dinosaurs, no problem. If they want to do that, that's okay. We go extinct. Somebody else will fill in the vacuum. And I guarantee you, those who want to fill in the vacuum are much more nefarious in what they want to do with us and with humanity, right? So we take it from the top. The Syrian civil war. Those people said, oh, Bashar al-Assad, he's a nationalist, he's not a socialist, we won't support it. We won't support it. Condemn an entire population to be brutalized by jihadists who were supported by the United States and its allies, right? Who were supported by the Gulf states who are lackeys of the US, right? Things are changing now, but at that time, that was a fact, right? You have many parties saying, we won't come to the aid of Syria. No, we won't support it at all. Nobody. We should give no quarter to anybody who's an Assadist, right? But wait a minute. Half Hafez al-Assad was a great friend of the Soviet Union. In fact, the Syrian cosmonaut went up with the Soviet Union on one of those Soyuz missions, right? What happened? The base that the Soviet Union had went to the Russian Federation, Well, what all of a sudden changed in that? They said, well, he's not perfect. Well, who's perfect? again, like as if, every leader out there has to be a saint. There's no saints, everybody. There's no saints. Marx made mistakes, Lenin made mistakes, Comrade Stalin made mistakes. No problem, we're human. We should accept that as a basic fact. And then we go from there. Well, we make mistakes with each other. It's okay. No problem. We learn, we can discuss, and we move forward, right? Then China. Oh, China. China, they're developing. Look, they have high-speed railroads. They have corporations. They have this. They're not socialists. We're not going to engage. In fact, some very major parties. I don't want to shame any of those major parties who are dear friends or now enemies of us because of our position on Russia. They said no, China not socialist. We are not going to. In fact, we should evict them from the International Meeting of Communist and Workers' Parties because they're not socialists. Right? That was a huge push to do that. China ended up saying, you don't want us, we won't come. And they have not been to a meeting in years now of SolidNet, right? They haven't come. They've done their own thing now. They're working with parties on the sideline in different forum, right? But the main thing is this. Okay, they're not 100% perfect in what you want, but look at what they've done for the people. As rightfully has been pointed out. They lifted hundreds of millions of people out of extreme poverty. I don't say it. The United Nations says it. Not me, the UN. Oh, international community. Oh, international community. There you go. They said it. Forget about me, right? So you have the international community saying that China is doing tremendous things. When I lived in China, for those who know, I lived in China 2013 to 2015. Got a master's degree there, taught at a university there, right? China was like a dream come true. Transportation, high-speed railroads, and they were building nonstop. And of course, my Chinese professor in Marxism said, well, yeah, we don't have endless wars. You guys are bombing everybody. And then you rebuild it, but it enriches a few people. The Dick Cheneys, the Condoleezza Rices, the George Bushes. You know what we do? We invest every penny back home. And that's why high-speed railroad everywhere. Lifting people out of poverty. Lifting communities, ethnic communities. Everyone's like, oh, free Tibet, free Xinjiang, free Inner Mongolia, free Hong Kong, Macau, everything. I said, have you been? I'll tell you one thing, I know Tibetan people and Uyghur people, they love it. Opportunities unlike any other. You want to bring Dalai Lama back? For what? Like it was Shangri-La. It was Shambhala somehow. He's like, what are you talking about? It's already everybody with feudal slaves. What do you think? They just all of a sudden, if all the Tibetan people didn't want China, they could revolt tomorrow. I guarantee you, nobody's revolting. Nobody's revolting. So of course, there are fanatics everywhere. But there, people have achieved things. They've achieved tremendous opportunities that were never provided to them because they had a feudal class over them, right? China has awoken. China has stood up and it's not backing down. That's why people are afraid of China, right? And China says, we'll do business with anybody. Why? Because we are a responsible international actor. A problem I see amongst our comrades is that somehow they have to be the most belligerent and revolutionary. Even Comrade Stalin wasn't like that. Read the correspondence. It's an amazing book of the correspondence between Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt. Stalin, mastermind. Why? Stalin said, why am I going to immiserate my people as we're trying to build socialism in one nation, to end up fighting not only Germany, but then to fight the United States and the United Kingdom? For what purpose? What good does it do to our people? If you think about it in that way, what good does it do if you have socialism for cockroaches? Everybody's destroyed and dead. What good does it do? You bomb out all the cities. Good job, you achieve socialism. It doesn't work that way. So, as somebody who's involved in international events, as people like you, comrades like you, astute in international affairs, don't think that somehow the people who are running these socialist countries, these communist countries, these countries ruled by workers' parties, that they have to be perfect in every international relation. No, they have a duty. They have a duty to their people to provide the best that they can. And that also means to not allow war to come to their shores, to come into their borders, right? And they'll do everything. They have to sit at the table at the end of the day. You have to be a responsible person, just like you have to be responsible to your home, to yourself, to the community around you. You have to be responsible in your national community too, right? I don't agree with my wife on everything. I don't agree with my parents on everything. What does it mean? I'm gonna say I'm not talking anymore. Get the hell out of here. That's it. We're clean break. No, that's not how the world functions. You have to dialogue. All right. The pandemic came. The pandemic came, and it was kind of surprising to me because as somebody who's studied theory at the university level, at the graduate school level, all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, you know, there was this guy, Giorgio Agamben, who wrote this piece about the state of exception. And all of a sudden now, mandates. I said, boy, oh boy, this really sounds like a state of exception. No, trust the science, comrade. Trust the science. I said, but wait a minute, comrades, didn't we just read like a decade ago about the pharmaceutical, medical, industrial complex, about all the horrible crimes and terror they committed, the Tuskegee experiments, the smallpox vaccine, all of the hurt veterans that came back, Gulf War syndrome? I said, weren't we talking about this before? No, shh, quiet, you're a conspiracy theorist. Trust the science. I said, okay, comrades, but we can trust the science, but we can also be critical of who's using the science, what they're doing with the science, and how they're making a fortune off of our lives, right? Once again, we were caught off guard. Instead of being prepared, as we should have been, to say, we absolutely are scientific socialists. However, we will not necessarily open up and accept these multi-billion-dollar corporations to come in and then say, this is what's good for you. Wait a minute, I want to see the data. Nobody produced the data. Nobody gave it to me. They said, just take it. I said, well, wait a minute, I want to see it. Like, okay.
75 years.
Yeah, I want to see it. Nope, we can't show you. Well, then why do I have to put it in me? You know? But the problem is that here I became right-winger. They said, oh, he's a Trump. I said, no, comrades, this is just... And so what ended up happening? Agamben in an Italian newspaper, right? Old leftist in Italy, wrote, this is exactly what I was talking about. And what did the left do? They rejected him. They said that he was somehow related to Meloni. He'd gone off the deep end. He's the same guy. He's the same guy he's ever been. He's just said, I was talking about biopolitics in this state of exception. This is it in reality. You know why? People shut everything down. They got money. They enriched themselves. They destroyed a lot of the social nets that existed. Yeah. They provided for a little bit, but think about the damage that long term. Long term, we are more isolated than ever before.
Yeah.
And I'll guarantee you, I talked to a lot of international comrades. I'll never forget one comrade from Eastern Europe, from the Balkans, said to me, he said, I believe it was planned for one purpose, to really destroy our communities. Because even in our countries that are communal, they have become very isolated. Older people dying of loneliness. Nobody goes and visits them now. And I thought to myself, that's a tragedy. And once again, we failed. We failed being unprepared for this. And so I want you to think about that. I want us really to reflect on these situations and to do some soul searching as a movement, to do some soul searching as political parties, to do soul searching as proclaimed socialists, communists, anti-imperialists, however you frame your identity, do some soul searching and say, how did we mess up? How did we fail? What could we have done that would have been better at that time? And the last, of course, is the situation now in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. The Russian special military operation. Again, we have a situation where we have a huge portion of international communist movement saying it's an inter-imperialist war. We're not going to support Russia. We're not going to support them. In fact, Russia and China uniting is even a greater and worse imperialism than the United States. This is insanity. Yeah. And these are, by the way, these are communist parties that I myself have connections to, that I have a tremendous amount of love for, who my family has given blood for. But they have said these things and it hurts me. It hurts me because I think about all the bodies in the ground that fought for a better world, and now this is the best that we have. This is the ideology that we're going to profess. Is somehow this is an inter-imperialist war. What happened to the critique of fascism? This is an anti-fascist struggle. The other side has swastikas. Yeah. No, comrade. Yeah. No, it's not that way. It's a small portion. Even the Russians have Nazis. Are you kidding me? But that's the situation we're in, comrades. That's the international situation where we find ourselves. And when we're thinking about building a multipolar world order, we have to recognize there are many comrades who don't want that. Yeah. who are not on board with that, and who will fight us ideologically, who will malign us, defame us. I have it. On some very prominent communist websites, I have now been defamed because I participate on behalf of the party in the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. I participate now, coming in 2 weeks, I'll be in Rome for the International Peace Conference, where members of Hezbollah will be, members of parliament in Lebanon, where the former Slovakian Prime Minister will be. I'll be on the same panel, I'll be maligned again. But why should we be maligned for speaking to other people about the most pressing issues of our time? The thing is one of purity, right? And Carlos wrote the book, right?
Yeah.
Carlos wrote the book, right? We've been saying it since the beginning. Comrades, we're not pure. It's okay to not be pure. It's okay. We can try to be virtuous, but to be pure is to be utopian.
Yeah.
And we're not utopian. I'm sorry. Save that for the anarchists who are dreaming of bringing about an anarcho-syndicalist world and stuff like that. We are practical. We are practical because our duty is to the people. Our duty is to the people. And that's it. That's the basic. How can we benefit the working class? How can we benefit the class that is most oppressed, right? And in so doing that, you try to bring about a peaceful world, a strong world, a world of solidarity, a world of liberation. But that cannot come. You cannot bring that world at the expense of that class that you want because of purity. Because you say, no, we're going to do it the right way. Comrades, I'll tell you, there are many paths, like Sufi mystics used to say, there are many paths to the top of the mountain. Some countries will take one path, some countries will take another path. But the hope is to get all to the top, right? All streams come to the big source of water, right? So that's how we have to think. That's how we have to frame it. And I implore you all, please, for the love of everything holy and good, please, let's not keep bringing each other and attacking each other and bringing everybody down. Let's lift each other up. Let's build each other. Let's continue to enhance. If you have an issue with a comrade, say, comrade, I implore you, check this out. Read it, let's discuss. Let's discuss. Let's be not only diplomatic, let's be human about our relations. Let's be virtuous in how we present ourselves. Let's just be good people. And in so doing so, you bring people to our side. You do. Because we don't pander to that stuff. I don't like to get involved in, people have their own personal lives, let them have it. Our job is bigger than that. And so I really implore you all, if we are to bring about a new world, that's the only way we're going to do it. I don't see any other path forward. The path forward is to be disciplined, to be mature. We're no longer in high school, comrades. I remember high school. I went to an all-boys high school, by the way. And which was a little different, because we didn't really have cliques, because we were all a bunch of bros. You know? The biggest nerds were with the biggest jocks. Why? Because it was our high school, you know? So I want us to come together in that kind of spirit, and to say we're all on the same team. We all want, hopefully, the same thing. Let's get there, and if we have different ways to achieve it, let's do it. But I want us to really soul search and study these 4 events. I want us to analyze the current situation, and I want us to really push our comrades who might have different opinions to read, to study, and to continue to develop themselves, and not just to fall into the trap of sloganeering and virtue signaling for that which cannot happen. I wish it could. Like you, I wish it could, but it can't. So let's try to build what we can. Thank you very much. I'm open. Any questions? Of course, please, let's go over here.
Yeah, I really like that you brought up how the COVID pandemic and its response was like this very divisive issue among the left, because it was such a major event in recent history, and it got me thinking that the whole believe the science, scientism religion, as I call it, is blatantly anti-scientific. Science is a method that you use to understand the world around you. It's not a cult, it's not a religion. And I can't stand it when people say believe the science. It just is one of my biggest pet peeves. And also, building socialism is impossible without human connections, as you said. So I think that the response to COVID here in the US is blatantly anti-communist. Yeah, I'm just really glad that you spoke about that, because it just really very thought-provoking, and it made me realize yeah, this whole COVID response is a great obstacle to building socialism, but now that we've identified it, we just have to overcome it, and now we gotta work on it.
You're absolutely right. You know, there's a neighbor in town. So I live in a small town of 600 people. We have no police. That's how small our town is, right? No police, no nothing. Everybody knows each other. We had a neighbor who had a sign out saying no mandates. And so of course everybody knows I ran for Congress as a communist. I asked her, what do you think about the sign? I said, I agree. I agree. No mandates. I agree. He said, well, how could you agree with that? You're killing people. I said, first of all, nobody's dying like that because we don't have the mandates, right? If we had a real society that cared about people, they would say, here, everybody have money, stay at home, relax, do what you gotta do. We'll support you.
Yeah.
You really care about the people? We'll support you. No debt, don't worry about it. Nobody can collect debt. No student loans, no credit cards, no mortgages, nothing. Everything frozen. We'll give you money, take it easy, relax. People would have stayed home anyway. People would have relaxed. People would have been in smaller circles, right? Instead, what they do, give out pennies. Everybody's still charging everything. And then extracting, people still have to go to work. People still have to labor. People are struggling to survive. Loneliness, depression sets in. People have anxiety. How are the mandates taking care of the people's health? In fact, they have worse than the people's health. Now the people are stressed beyond all belief. You want to help them? Give them even more money than they make in their wage. Help them out. Help them get ahead a little bit once they come on the other side of the pandemic. They didn't do that. Why? Because if you really think about it, the mandates were an opportunity to enrich the capitalist class. How? Destroying small business. Think about how many small businesses were destroyed, how many small farms in my community were closed because they could not meet it. After years, you know how many small operations, butchers, organic farms, dairy farms, you know how many closed down? A lot. And you know where their properties went? To all the people from New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey who bought second homes in Vermont. I'm sorry to say, they enriched themselves. And so it's disheartening to me. You came to my farm just a month and a half ago. You as well, comrade. The people who have most benefited from the past 4 years have been the elites. 100%. None of us benefited. None of us. They say, oh, we gave them a student loan protection. For what? For a few years. No good. No good. You know why? Because people lost their jobs. People lost getting ahead in their lives, right? So of course, all that taking back, you end up with a net loss. You really do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
And I think that's why at this point we can no longer dismiss like the issue of COVID mandates and all that as simply a culture war. It's class warfare.
It is a class warfare. It is a class warfare. And the response to mandates doesn't necessarily have to be, we're going to open everything up. It's that the government provide for the welfare of the people. If you really care, if the government really cares about the people, open the coffers. You can open them. You got a lot of money there. Instead of giving it to the Pentagon, give it to the people. And it'll only be a fraction of what the Pentagon gets, right? That's a fact. But you know, the problem is that it's become so politicized that by saying this, oh, you're a right-winger. So, how am I a right-winger? I'm talking about the people, the working class. Yeah. I'm talking about, forget about these, the best was the Ayn Rand Institute getting money for the PPP. I thought to myself, I love it. The people who were like, socialism is bad, don't take any government handout. Oh yes, actually our employees need money, you know. Yeah. We need money during this period of time. We can't support ourselves, right? That's the bankruptcy of the system that we have right now. And about the scientism, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. And I really believe that we have to be very careful when we have, remember the science? Black Lives Matter, science is real, this and that. I have a couple in my class, different styles. Right? And I have the one from Subliminal Jihad that said Khrushchev lied, and this and that, which is fantastic. The students are like, whoa, these are all like really disparate. The thing is that we're not sloganeering here. The idea is that, yes, of course, the scientific method works. We have atomic energy, we have all of these things, right? The building that we are in is because people have worked over millennia to come up with, okay, what makes concrete, what does this, what does that. That doesn't mean that I create a product, it's 100% okay. Well, wait a minute, we gotta be tested. It's gotta be, we gotta organize, we gotta see what's going on. We gotta review the data. But if you conceal that, that's a problem, right? And ultimately, those corporations are driven for what? They're driven by what? By profit. They're not driven by the welfare of the people. If they were, they'd be like Salk, who gave the polio vaccine for free. I don't want it. He could have made a fortune off of it. Didn't. That's the people I trust. I would trust the vaccine maker, because of course the science works. We don't have polio anymore and things like that. I would trust somebody who said, I have it for free. It's open source. Take it. It's yours. I would trust that much more than a company that says, This is not only intellectual, it's part of a military project, Operation Warp Speed, and it's all under wraps. You're not going to know 75 years, good luck.
Yeah.
Do a FOIA.
And they have immunity.
And then immunity from any damages, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, let's be critical about this. Let's be critical. Let's not fall into the traps of the right, but let's be critical.
Yeah.
Andy, please.
One of the things I talked to my dad about a lot, he's a teacher, and I know you are as well, is that since the lockdowns, the kids have been far less engaged in class because they got used to being on the computer and the teachers being pretty easy on them and not having to really engage. So I'm just wondering if you've noticed that since it went down.
It's 100% changed, really. Not only that, human interactions. Kids don't look at you in the eye anymore. They feel very embarrassed.
Yeah.
They feel very self-conscious. And so I'm just like, it's okay, I'm not gonna hurt you, I'm not gonna eat you. I just want to talk to you like a human, right? I want to see you in the eyes. People are very nervous, a lot of anxiety. They say, I'm really anxious to talk in class, right? They're used to the screen now. It has stunted their emotional growth. We talk about social emotional learning now, it's a big thing, SEL, right? It has stunted their social emotional learning. And cell phones, right, technology, have become an issue of like human rights. I say no cell phones in the classroom. We don't need them. We have 45 minutes, 50 minutes together. Let's talk together. Oh, you're violating my human rights. You want to talk about violation of human rights? Let's talk about Palestinians. Let's talk about Yemenis. Let's talk about Sahrawis. Let's talk about people at the border. But please don't come here and talk about human rights in your cell phone, right? That has nothing to do with human rights. You're 100% right. I think that people's attention spans have narrowed tremendously. Yeah. I think that they're a lot more prone to anxiety attacks, to a lot more difficulty engaging with classmates, with teachers, with administration, on the sports teams. And so I really am nervous. I'm nervous because you've stunted the growth of an entire generation now in the most critical period of time when they are getting out there, meeting people, learning how to interact, learning how to, all of those things in school, the fights, all of it's part of development of self, right? Not all of it is pretty, but all of it is part of learning ourselves. That stuff has been lost because you can't do that online, right? You can't do that online. And I'm really concerned about that. And I'm also concerned about the fact that family structures have been destroyed. Yeah. Or seriously destabilized. Why? Because you had two parents at home or one parent at home on the computer doing their work remotely. You had the kids in the other room doing their work remotely. They can't eat dinner together. They can't have lunch together. They can't interact with each other because they all have crazy hours and are doing schedules at crazy times. And that has disrupted family life on an unbelievable. And so that hurts for me as a parent, with children, with a wife, with a family, broader family structure. We haven't felt it as much in a rural area because thankfully we don't have cell service where we're at. So the phones, good luck if the internet goes down. We're very happy actually. Yeah. We don't have to worry about anything. But I really think that especially in urban areas and suburban areas, it has caused tremendous damage. And I think the damage will be longer. We won't really understand the full extent of it for years to come or even decades to come. But that's our job now. Our job, our responsibility is to provide the spaces for people to reintegrate with all sorts of social opportunities, with solidarity, movements and struggles, with the trade union movement, anything to get people activated again, brought in, and say, let's get together again. Let's have dinners again. Let's have community again. There is nothing anti-communist or anti-socialist about eating together, having big feasts together, having harvest festivals together, doing things that don't involve reading anything. Just be together. That could be sometimes even more politically advantageous than having a book club that ends up descending into daggers into each other's backs. That you're not truly you're not truly revolutionary enough. You're ideologically impure. Wait a minute. Let's just eat. Let's share a pizza together. And let's talk. Let's share a drink together. I'm not saying go out there to the bar and get shit-faced, as they say, but let's at least be human with each other. Those bonds are necessary. I think that's been lost in the pandemic. I think we have to rebuild. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us.
One of the most significant things I think that Gennady Zyuganov developed in terms of Marxist theory was this idea of atomization of the working class in late-stage capitalism. And I always thought for a while like the gig economy was a huge step in that direction, but that emerged not that long ago, and I feel like the next step after that was this whole pandemic. I mean, like the lockdowns and everything, it has atomized people even more significantly than the emergence of the gig economy, taking people out of a socialized atmosphere of work and the means of production and everything. It's insane how the working class is going to be when all these people who have trouble even communicating with each other are going to be in 10 years, 20 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing, I'm unique in that I live with my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my grandmother-in-law. My wife's grandmother is 99. She lives with us. We don't put her in a nursing home. We have 10 people on the farm in different houses. And so for me, and of course, the comrades who came, they saw the whole family is around. And I think that that's very important. I think if we really are proud of being communists, even if you don't live at home, call. If you have good relations, I'm not saying everybody has good relations. I don't say anybody has, family members that they can. Call family, call friends, be connected. Talk to the older people in the community.
Yeah.
They get very lonely. I mean, my grandmother-in-law, she's 99. She's like lost everybody around her. All she has is us. And I guarantee you, if we put her in a nursing home, which by the way is the biggest ripoff, she would have passed away a long time ago.
Yeah.
But the fact that she has family, she has, her great-grandchildren, my kids to be with her, to hang around, to just be there. I think it's so important. I really think that we as communists have an obligation to our communities to really take care of everyone. And that doesn't only mean along racial or gender or sexual orientation lines. It means the elderly. It means those who don't have the means. It means those who are maybe a little strange. Maybe they are just outcasts. We have those people in our community. I have them in my small town. Say hello. Say hello. Check up on them if you haven't seen them in a while. I just think being human, people end up equating your actions, and if they know what your political what political position you have, they end up saying, these people are good.
Yeah.
I don't see any Republicans coming. They only come when they want my vote. I don't see any Democrats coming. They only come when they want my vote. But they see these people, they come every time. They say, I don't even vote. Don't even care about me. Don't worry about me. I just care about you. That's the key. And I think if we did that more, we'd be in a much better society. We'd be in a much better world. And I hope, that's my hope and prayer, is that, to whoever's listening, if anybody is, I just hope that that's where we're headed, in that direction. Yes,
I think
please.
that goes hand in hand with the virtue ethic overall.
I agree, 100%. I agree. And I think it's very important to recognize there's a big push from some on the movement that we should abhor the classics, we should get rid of the canon and all of this and that. I just say expand the canon.
Yeah.
Expand it. I learn a lot from Confucius, from Lao Tzu, from all of these different philosophers. I think it's very important. Marx himself wrote his dissertation, for those who know, who have Tucker's volume, that classic red volume of Marx and Engels' work. The dissertation is in there, right? Marx was a classicist at first, right? That's a classic, or when you're developing in philosophy, you read the classics, whether it be Marcus Aurelius and the Meditations, whether it be Plato and Aristotle, the Nicomachean Ethics, right? The Republic. You begin to learn about the debates, and then you recognize, oh my God, the debates in this country, Madison, we were talking about, Federalists, Anti-Federalists, they were centered on the classics, What did a small republic do in ancient Rome and ancient Greece? How did it survive? How do we build this republic? And we are a continuation of that. We are now at the next stage. All right, now we've learned from the bourgeois revolutions, which were progressive at their time. I think we should maintain all of the revolutions, Haitian, American, French, Russian, Greek, all of the wars of independence, Simon Bolivar in Latin America, they all were progressive at their time, and they should be recognized for that. They provided opportunities that no person had had up until that time. We should be okay with saying that, because communists have said it. When I went to Cuba, I walked into the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Havana, where I gave a lecture, and there was a huge bust of Lincoln.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, and I talked to Dr. Talia Fung, who was a main philosopher and proponent of socialism in Cuba at the time of the revolution, and she was much older at the time. And she looked and she said, of course we have Lincoln. He freed the slaves. This was momentous, right? The Civil War, through their eyes, was a war of liberation as well.
Yeah.
And I always think back to that moment where there would be comrades in our movement that would say that statue should be taken down.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think to myself, he's not perfect. We can't judge him in 2023 on our standards.
Yeah.
For the standards of the time, it was heroic, and Marx wrote to him.
Yeah.
Marx communicated with him. Some of the generals, as we know, were part of the International Working Men's Association, right?
Yeah.
I just think it's important to recognize that when looking at history, Marcus Aurelius was the emperor. Does that mean we reject the No, of course not. Take it at the value. See it. Reject some of the things. Of course, we don't want a new Roman Empire. We're not traditional in that sense, right? But we can take some good things, right?
Yeah.
We can take some good things from all of these systems of thought. Confucius had some horrible things to say about women, right? The 3 obeys, for those who know. A woman must obey her father before marriage, her husband during marriage, and her firstborn son on her husband's death, right?
Yeah.
That was the obedience for women, right? That doesn't mean that everything that Confucius said was wrong. Clearly, Xi Jinping and the Communist Party of China have found some good things to say about Confucius, as I'm sure they have to say about legalism and a whole bunch of other philosophical traditions within China's history. It's okay to take in, to pick what things are good in the various systems that have come.
Hegel famously said that like women don't belong in politics; they belong at home.
Are we going to reject Hegel? Throw Hegel out too.
I have a historical addition I want to make to that. Because obviously when the October Revolution happened, a lot of Bolsheviks had this understanding, like, let's just throw out the classics, we're going to just create a new society and everything. But by the time of like Stalin's administration and everything, Alexander Nevsky had become like a national hero who was a feudal lord in the Russian Empire. But he fought the Teutons, and he became a national anti-Nazi symbol.
They had an order of him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, they even have an order of him. And even though he's a feudal lord, he's like considered a national hero, even in the Soviet Union.
Of course. Why not? Why not? You can have national heroes like that. I don't think it's wrong to say that some of these leaders were tremendous figures. You know, I don't think it's wrong. You know, in my U.S. history class, I don't think it's wrong to say that there were some amazing things that the framers did in this country. And I just think that that's a reality. That's okay to do. The constitutions of every socialist republic look to the U.S. Constitution as well as a frame. It's a reality. I'm sorry for the ultras out there, but the Constitution of the United States was by far the framework by which many subsequent constitutions looked to. Ho Chi Minh looked to Declaration of Independence, right? That's okay. Mao actually there's a great article on JSTOR. Mao was enamored with George Washington.
I didn't know that.
Yes!
There was a 60 Minutes interview.
That's it, you know?
There's a 60 Minutes interview where like Mike Wallace talks to Jane Xiamen, and there's like a whole like 10 minutes of it where like Jane goes on about how like Lincoln was like his inspiration and stuff, and like how like every Chinese communist like they have like a special session where they read like about Washington and Lincoln and like everyone in China, especially in the party, learns about the American Revolution as like some great historical event.
Why not? Mao talked about it in his works. I just think that it's really important for us to recognize our history, to pick the parts that are really important, to carry them on. Not to reject it all, not to be like some comrades in our movement who are like, everything American is bad. Good luck getting anybody on our side. Good luck getting anybody on our side. I'm not saying worship the flag and have an altar to them in your house. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we come from a tradition. We're building upon it, obviously. We're not gonna change this system overnight. Even Russia wasn't able to change overnight. They had a lot of complexity. China hasn't been able to. You change slowly, gradually. Of course, incrementalism. Oh, bad comrade! You know, revolution, destroy everything. Okay, you achieve nothing.
You get something. You get year zero Pol Pot.
You know, it's like, come on, please.
Yeah, I'd really love to get your thoughts on something I've been troubling over. So, there's like two principles in my mind. One is, I think, dialogue and continuity, stability is really important. That's like sort of core principle. And at the same time, I feel like when there's times of like slander, I have the feeling that I would rather just not engage with it at all, or like reject it out of hand. And I always wonder, how do you square the circle there? How do you identify one versus the other? Like, when is the time for dialogue versus when is it like, this is just an attack, this isn't a political disagreement, there's no ground here to grow anything in. We need to sort of pass away. How do you think about that?
Me personally, when I think about that transition from dialogue, respectful dialogue that's constructive, to sort of, we could say, defamatory, sloganeering, attacks, ad hominems, I think that transition happens when people's arguments begin to falter and you realize that the conversation has shifted, and then start the attacks, whether it's against you personally, whether it's against your political position, whether against some of the ideas you hold. And what I've always done, I just back out. That's how I've always been. Those who know, there are some of us who are veterans. I was an army officer, right, in infantry, graduate of airborne school. And my feeling has always been, the best people that I learned from in the military were those who said, you never start a fight, and you never engage when somebody comes up, just back away. Back away. That's the big man thing to do. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. There are many times that I have been defamed. Not many of you know. Not only some stuff online, But there are many times where people will say negative things to me. I just say, your opinion, no problem. I just back away. If it's really egregious, I have gone to court over it. And I've said, if you believe that, show the evidence. I'll show mine. I'll put everything on the table. The judge can tell me to produce anything, but you produce it too, right? I really think that part of that transition, the change from dialogue, from something constructive to destructive, is one that tries to throw us off kilter and to get us in that position. Don't give anybody the chance to get you in that position, right? I think that's where they'll use it and manipulate it. So I try to be much more cautious about engaging with people when I know that their ultimate end is to do that, right? And that actually connects with the media. Many media interview us, by the way. Many have come and interviewed us and things like that. Obviously, those who know, I am a commentator on CGTN, Press TV, and RT. But if US media, which they did come and they interviewed me for my campaign, they maligned me, of course. They said, he supports Stalin and Mao and things. They killed all these people. I said, of course I support them. But they put the numbers in, right? They put the numbers in to malign me. What did I do? I simply wrote back to the editorial board. I said, I think that was vindictive. I think it was inappropriate. But I respect your right to do that. And I will continue to do what I do, right? I didn't make it a big deal because I don't think that they want that. Part of the system feeds on that. They feed on antagonisms, right? Because antagonisms ultimately shift people's focuses from the conversation that originally started over ideals and theories to the personal. I abhor anything that is about the personal. I could care, do whatever you want, sleep with whoever you want, hang out with whoever you want, be whatever you want. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for building something. I'm here for theories and values. And that is all a sideshow. And I think that's the bread and circus of this society now. I think really that's where we're headed. So I would say dialogue that's constructive is very important. As it begins to descend, I personally don't feel the need to engage with that. Why? Because I already know that person has made up their mind and is already in that position. I might end it by saying, I'll give you some sources and send you some sources, and if you'd like to discuss more, I'd be happy after you read that or watched that, maybe even a TikTok video that you produced, or a documentary that you made about Donbass. Send that to them and say, if you have any further questions, I'm happy to talk, but always respectfully. Always. I think upholding that puts us in a better position overall. I really do, because clearly the polemics haven't worked. We have to be honest with ourselves. Let's just analyze it scientifically. Everything that's been done, all of the millions of tweets that have gone out, the crazy things that have been said about one another, none of it has helped at the end of the day. None of it. I haven't seen any movement. I haven't seen anything build. I've only seen destruction. And I've only seen people get burnt out and leave.
From a party perspective, is there a turning point between like fraternal relations, but we disagree, to okay, you were taking like a pretty clearly antagonistic line? Because I think, especially in the U.S. context, there's a couple different parties where you can see them kind of treading that line and sometimes going over. What are your thoughts around how to handle that?
I think that we always should be hopeful that the parties are redeemable. I think that we always should say that we disagree with the theory, we disagree with the current line of that party, but we do not reject the history. Like, for example, I might disagree with some of the current positions of the Communist Party of Greece, but I will never reject the party that my family gave blood for and my uncle gave his life for. Never. Never, ever, ever. Because I know what they did. I know the sacrifice. And they were, unlike other parties that bullshit, they went to the mountains and fought for 9 years for their liberation. They fought against the Nazis, the Bulgarians, the Italians, then they fought against the Anglo-American alliance, against them with all the fascists and royalist forces. So I think that rejecting the Communist Party of Greece's position on Russia can be done in a way where you say, I hope that we can come back to the table and we're still gonna engage in international forums with them, but will I malign them and say that somehow the Communist Party of Greece as an entity is irredeemable? I won't. Just like the CPUSA.
The irony is, they probably think that about us.
They probably think that about us?
Like, have you seen Independence of Communists?
I have. That was what I was referencing to when I was attacked.
So like we made this is the thing you're getting at, where it's like even if they view us as irredeemable, we don't necessarily have to view them as irredeemable.
Correct. And I won't stoop to that level. I won't.
And to be honest, are there parties that are irredeemable? Yes. I wouldn't say the KKE, although they kind of tread on that line sometimes. But like, for example, is every party even worth redeeming? Like, look at all those Trotskyist internationals. Should we go around?
Oh, I'm not even talking about the Trotskyists. Because I don't think Trotsky necessarily is redeemable fully. I think early Trotsky might be disconnected
I'm
from
not talking
later
about like the
Trotsky.
Latin
But
American Trotskyists. I'm talking, you know exactly.
oh yeah, I know who you're referring
Like,
to.
obviously, like Trotskyists in Brazil have like big influence in like.
For sure,
Like,
for sure.
I'm talking
No
about
doubt.
like, and not even just Trotskyists, because even some so-called MLs. Like, for example, do we have to address every like Maoist or quote-unquote Stalinist microsect? No.
No, I don't think so. We don't anyway, right? But that's what I think. That's really the crux of it. Is I really think that we should be respectful, and ultimately, there are comrades in one way or another, right? Whether they're in our parties or not, whether we're fraternal or not, I really think that ultimately our goal is also to educate, and it's to educate our comrades too, because our comrades fall every time. You know, what was that? The classic Orthodox saying about the monks falling and get up again. We have a lot to learn from that too.
Yeah.
We fall and get up again. The idea that somehow when somebody falls, you kick them, you stab them, you bury them, is wrong, I think.
Yeah.
Because we all do. So I wouldn't do that to my children when they make mistakes. Why would you do that to your comrades who you want to build a new world with, right? It just doesn't make sense, right? It's exactly what the enemy wants. That's what the enemy wants. The enemy wants us to bury each other. Because then the enemy wins.
Yeah.
Perfect, right? Perfect. Please.
Former Army vet. I'm wondering your perspective on like any sort of revolutionary potential within an all-volunteer force like we have here. Just really that's it.
I think there is.
Yeah.
I think there is. I think that there's been no successful revolution that hasn't had elements of a military involved. That's just a fact. Hugo Chavez himself was a high officer, right? In the Venezuelan army. The Bolshevik Revolution, there were many who defected from the Tsarist military, including top commanders who came on the side, the Chinese as well. I honestly think that anybody who somehow says that all soldiers are irredeemable are not only historically wrong and theoretically wrong, but just on the ground materially wrong. Because in an all-volunteer force, there are many who went there, not because they are nationalists and say like, let's go conquer everybody, but because they said, I don't have opportunities. The military can not only get me opportunities, they can teach me life skills, and they can get me ahead. I can get that GI Bill, I can go get a bachelor's degree, because if this country is built off of, you need to have an education, you need to have skills to get ahead. Well, if you're in a community that is disadvantaged and doesn't have those opportunities that you can have, the military is your best bet. And why not? Why not? And why would we limit ourselves from people who have skills that are important? I'm just saying, okay, maybe we're not going to be doing airborne operations as the Communist Party, but still, all these skills are important. All these skills and the discipline that they have. I'm a proponent in discipline. I give my kids firm boundaries. I think it's important. I think it's necessary. It's how I grew up. I just think that we need to be more disciplined as a people, as a movement. We need to be more disciplined. I love that when I read back and see documentaries about the Black Panther Party, about many groups, regardless of orientation. I see a lot of them disciplined, and I think we can learn a lot about that. The sort of hedonism that we have, or the rampant free-for-all, does a disservice to us. I'm not saying not have a good time. Even I tell my students, you can have a good time. But the question is, when it gets serious, you get serious, right? You have a firm commitment, and and I just think that we have to do that. We have a duty to do that. We do. We have a duty to do that. And there are a lot of vets. There are a lot of vets nearby me who are very anti-imperialist, anti-war, who are against the war in Ukraine. And it would be an absolute disservice to wipe them all off and say you're irredeemable. No, in fact, they are the most redeemable. Some of them voted for me when I ran as a communist. Not because they necessarily like communism or know anything about it, but because they put their trust in me, because I talk to them all the time. They're in the community with me. Our kids hang out, and we can discuss like people to people, right? That's the key, I think.
How many votes did you get in 2020?
I got 3,452, somewhere around there. In comparison, Gloria La Riva, who ran for president, got like 300 in Vermont. I got more votes than any communist in history in Vermont.
Wow.
By a huge job. And it's not even just me. It's just the idea that people on the ground, people rooted in a community, can make tremendous change. So getting 1% was a really big deal, not because we won anything, but because it showed the people who were against us that people really were listening, and that people, of my town, I got like 10% of my town voted for me.
Wow.
10% of my town. And my town is like, there are some heavy hitters in my town, Democrats and Republicans. And the fact that I got 10% is just shocking. But I'm a member of the community. Like, people who have no connection to communism, never read Marx in their lives, were like, we know Chris. So I have a feeling that if everybody did that in their communities, bomba, we could start building real power.
Yeah.
We could start building real power. I'm sorry, I don't want to, I'm mindful of the time.
No, please.
We're good?
We're a little over time, but
Okay,
let's
guys, please.
So this is directly related to his question, kind of building on it. My part might be a little bit more controversial. When I was in PSL, there was a big internal discussion surrounding the military, and somebody made the argument at the time against the military having revolutionary potential by saying an all-volunteer military serves the same function as law enforcement does, just being an armed group of the state that enacts violence on behalf of the state. And I guess what the question here is do you feel like that there is any revolutionary, tactical, or organizing potential in any form of law enforcement at all? Specifically from I know you're in a really rural area, organizing in really small communities where law enforcement is an actual part of the community, where I know it's very different in somewhere like Chicago or larger cities with omnipresent, faceless forces.
I think that distinction is really important. Like, do I know the sheriffs in town? Absolutely. They're at every event that I go to. Do I shake their hands and say, good morning, sir, how are you? They're older than me, of course. Absolutely. Am I going to be antagonistic with them? No, because there's no need to. There's no need to. They don't bother me, I don't bother them. They never are around, really. And the sheriff, as you know, the sheriffs don't do the duty of regular uniformed police officers, like the state police in our area, which actually administer the policing duties. The sheriff's job is really to serve warrants, to serve court orders, things like that, summonses. So their function isn't necessarily oppressive in the same way as police in other areas are. My idea is this. I think everybody has revolutionary potential to some extent, right? I think everybody. I don't think that there's not one person that is irredeemable per se. I think it's a question of how much effort are you willing to put into to really opening somebody's eyes, and whether that comes from one-on-one, whether that comes from just having opportunities for them to hear new things. A lot of the sheriffs in town, for example, are older. A lot of them are retired police officers who are now just sheriffs. They were elected. There's sheriff deputies who are just townspeople who are around. I don't find anything antagonistic with them, and I don't see them doing, yes, are they part of a structure? If we're thinking about this structurally, are they part of an apparatus that is oppressive? Yes. But as an individual, this is where you disconnect the individual from the structure, right? The individual isn't doing anything against me or even against our movements or organized. I have a communist reading group, they never are involved, right? They're part of an apparatus. But can I engage with them? Absolutely, because sheriffs, for example, in our place are elected officials, so I can debate them, right? I can debate them, I can engage with them. You can't do that with a city cop here, right? They're not an elected position, right? They're a job, they're employed, they have a union, for example, right? So it's a different thing. I think ultimately that one would have to make the distinction between those that are employed in big cities, those who are rural. I think that would be a distinction to make. And I also think that law enforcement, depending on where they are, is a different story. Like if you're a police officer in a suburban area versus a police officer in an area that's predominantly populated by people of color, I think there's a distinct difference as to what you're doing there, how you're operating in that area, and things like that. There's no way that we can say that 100% of the police officers are bad or 100% are good, because there are good, decent police officers who are members of our community that I know, that I interact with, and then there are those who are not good. People who go there because they have a power trip. Who knows? They have an ego. They like wearing the uniform. They got authority and things. And they do target. I mean, some of them, of course, are racist. It's just a fact. And the apparatus itself comes from a racist origin. There's no doubt about that. It comes from a class and a race origin. Of course, the police are those who enforce the class dynamic, right? They are the enforcers of maintaining property relations, right? Because ultimately, if without that, we'll have a revolution tomorrow.
Yeah.
We're ready to go, right? So I think that in that way, you could find. I think it would be not going to the police officer, but if the police officers came to you, you'd have to be very careful because, of course, we know the history of COINTELPRO, we know the history of all of that. I think that this is a much more gut instinct situation where unless you're in the community and you know them for a long period of time and they know you and there's like links, that would be different than if you just show up as a college student and police officer comes into your Marxist center and is like, hey guys, like I'm really interested in Marxism. And then I don't really have the best feeling about that. I'm like, wait, who are you? Like, what's going on? I might say to the police officer, here, you can take this book if you want to learn and you want to discuss. More than happy to correspond with you, or maybe just to come about just the theory. But about like tactics and things like that, I wouldn't. If we're gonna do a march, I'm not gonna get them involved necessarily, right? Right, but I can talk to them about theory all day. I've been detained by Customs and Border Protection, right? I've been detained. You weren't detained this time around.
No, not this
I was
time.
detained when I lived in China and I came back. I was detained on other opportunities. I would talk to the CBP guys about theory. I say, guys, have you read the Constitution? Oh no. I said, well, it'd be really interesting if you read it. I think it'd be really good, I started talking about all sorts of stuff. And they're like, oh, you got a lot of this like material, like Marxism. I said, yeah, we can talk about it, Do you think it's okay for the rich to have everything and the poor people to have nothing? Do you think it's good for working class people to be immiserated and to be struggling paycheck to paycheck? And I thought you're a man of family values. Wouldn't it be better for families to have a good paycheck, good home, child care, education for the kids? Don't you think our communities would be better? You'd have an easier job, right? You can do that. It's a question ultimately of tactics and how you do that, right? So that's how I would answer. I don't think there's a one size fits all for everybody. And I think that's where it becomes very nuanced, and that's where you have to play the role of being the diplomat and the ambassador on behalf of a political position or a political party or an organization to the wider community and see how you interact with that. If you want to remain isolated in like a little cult, you're not going to do anything. But how you approach that is how ultimately you build power. And we'll see. There's no right or reason.
I wanted to add something about the military question because I find it very interesting, and I also think that sometimes people understand it as like a false dichotomy between conscription and volunteer armies, as if a volunteer army has lack of compulsion. Because a lot of people actually volunteer because there is compulsion in terms of having to pay for university, or because they think it's a way to get out of a bad neighborhood that they grew up in. That there's that aspect, and also
it's called the poverty trap.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a form of compulsion to even volunteer forces, and like any other organization, I mean, like Chris was talking about, it's not homogeneous. It's got different political factions to it. Even, I mean, a lot of we associate an imperialist military with the idea a lot of times that everyone there is just like, yeah, let's kill everyone who doesn't like America. But I wouldn't say it's really like that, especially because a lot of military families that where like their grandfather was in the military, the father was in the military, they have a different idea of what it's like to be in the military. They feel like they're defending their country, and what they're ordered to do, they just believe that that's in defense of the country. And if politics changes, like, it's very unlikely that those sorts of people are going to be like, I'm not going to listen to the communists. I mean, some people will obviously be like that, but in many countries we've seen how regimes have changed, and the military has just been like, well, I don't get involved in politics. I'm just going to, I defend my country. I do what they say. So there would probably be very similar in an American situation, I would say, even though the institution is imperialist.
I agree 100% because the statistics, for example, as you well know, but those of us who have been in the military, as we know, the suicide rate, the depression, the substance abuse, the domestic violence. I mean, I was an officer with soldiers under me who had tremendous issues who were deployed. So I don't really think that, like the people who are like, in the movies, like, I love it, I want to kill. Those people leave the military and go to private military, like militias. Or they go to like, the what is it called? The not BlackRock. BlackRock. It is BlackRock, right? Black. Yeah, that's it. Or they go become mercenaries, in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
I remember there was an SF guy who had left. He was that first airborne drop into Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment, and afterwards he left. and they were going securing diamond mines in Africa. That was their job. He said making a ton of money, anything they want, all the best equipment, whatever. That's what they were doing. They were real soldiers of fortune. That's what they were up to. But a lot of the soldiers that I know who went and just left, from rural areas and went and fought, they came home. They are really hurting. And so when you go and talk to them, and one of them has become one of my dear friends, right? When you go talk to them and they're like, this country lied to me. They sent me to, the Iraqi people never did anything to me. The Afghan people never did anything to me. And I went there and I saw, and the horrors that you see in a war zone, for those of us who've been overseas and have seen it, they're unspeakable. And so you live with that. That actually is a revolutionizing potential right there. And so when they come back, they say, how was I sent to do that? Why did we do it? They start asking the questions. If you're around them, if you don't just abhor them and say, I want nothing to do with you because you serve in the imperialist military, because they are down and out, the white nationalists might come. The militias might come.
They will come.
The 3%ers, oh yeah, there's a lot of them around. 3%ers come and say, come with us. I got all the answers for you. But instead I go and I say, it's okay, you were a pawn in a much bigger process of, you talk about imperialism, you talk about capitalism, you talk about super exploitation, you talk about these countries, you talk about different economic systems, you talk about overthrowing the history of regime change. When you do that, I think you really help and you really enact change. I really urge you all to not fall into the trap of this entire group of people have no revolutionary potential. It's just not true. It's not historically proven. It's unscientific.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, Chris,
thank you so much.
Yeah, Chris, that was great.
Appreciate it.
All your speeches, they never cease to surprise. But anyway, yeah. So I know there was a song scheduled into this. You guys want to take a break, or you just want to go into the closing ceremony so that we don't end late? What do you guys think? Take a little break, or just want to read through it?
Whatever works for you.
I think let's get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into it. All right. Well, yeah. So we'll just move on to the closing segment then, and we'll have the closing song at the end. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone for coming, because it was really good to meet all of you and have these discussions with you. Let's stay in touch. Anyone who wants to, get involved in the kind of discussions that we have at the Revolution Report and everything, we have a general chat. I can put you in the direction of that. I want to thank all the speakers who came, because really we had an amazing lineup. I thought the discussions were very interesting. Slava's presentation, I learned so much from, and my focus is Russia and Ukraine, and I didn't know half the stuff you were talking about. Chris, you brought up so many good points that I mean, your points about like the Syrian conflict and China and everything. I never thought about those four categories in combination with each other. And I think after this conference, I'm gonna read more about like what kind of happened on the left during those times, because I'm sure there's a lot of parallels and everything. And so, yeah, everyone, Eddie, also thanks for coming. I really like it. Yeah, so I'm really happy with this first event of the Revolution Report. Hope we have more in the future, and we've got some experience organizing stuff like this now as well. So yeah, it's really, really impressive and satisfying. So for the closing part of the program, we also wanted to give Lars some time to talk about our new website, our new logo and everything, because we've made some changes to the way we look and the way we do things and everything. Our new website looks really cool, so Lars, please take it away.
Hi, so I'm Lars. I'm the acting Chief Technology Officer and Lead Designer here at the Revolution Report. Glad to be on board. I've been also just wrangling things behind the scenes, as has Slava. I want to thank Slava, because she's been really all this food, all the rest of the organizing. On top of the fact that she gave an awesome presentation, so yeah.
I was going to start a Slavic chant, but that might be a little too
right. So this is our new logo, as you can see here. There's also a press backdrop at the back that you're free to take pictures of as we finish the night. Basically, I just took kind of the principles of what the Revolution Report was about beforehand, and it has been, and tried to just kind of instill, I guess, more forward-looking, just towards like a post-capitalist society kind of vibe to it, along with just kind of making something more timeless that kind of is broadly representative of media now, but also harkens back to print media, everything, you know, that we all come from. So that's the general philosophy behind this. Hoping everybody here likes it. I know the crew has gotten used to it, and they like it now. So yeah, and then beyond that, and I'll just preview this briefly. Today is the soft launch of our new website, which I've got somewhere on my.
Oh my God! The Revolution Report.
So, right now, this is still basically in beta, but it's going to be a public beta for a while as we continue to build it out. It's therevolutionreport.org with no more dashes, so easier to type, easier to remember. Yeah. And it will slowly be replacing our pre-existing site. They're going to exist in tandem for a little while because right now we've basically got the home page, the news and articles feed,